Already running 20 minutes late. So welcome everyone to Committee of the Whole. City Clerk, can you see if Commissioner O'Connor is joining us?
Yeah, I'm watching for him. I'll check with him.
Okay.
He was having a little bit of computer issue during fiscal.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We have a full agenda. A couple reminders, Commissioners. Right after Committee of the Whole, we have executive session for two items, both related to legal opinions. So at the end of I'll be calling the question to go in executive session, and then you have a separate meeting request for that. And then those of you who are with me on Economic Development Project Team, we meet today at 3 o'clock, and then we'll be back together tonight at 7 for our public meeting. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started today by turning this over to our city manager. So we have a couple update items to begin with, and then three resolutions after that. So city manager, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Just to remind everybody, particularly those in City Hall, if you're not speaking, make sure you put your mics on mute. Thank you again for your time this morning. Real briefly, before I get into the agenda item, I just want to take a point of personal privilege and recognize Ms. Janet Wallace. I don't know if she has a camera on, but she's served as our city debt and authority finance officer for some time, but has also had a distinguished career in our city for 30 years. And this is her last commission meeting. She has announced her retirement. And so I just wanted to acknowledge all the good work that she's done and thank her for her many, many years of service in the various roles that she served in. We certainly will miss her, but wish her the best in the future. So congratulations to her. Commissioners, we also have a presentation this morning that it will be in two parts. And so the first part will be our routine update on COVID and our response and recovery response. And we will pause and see what questions you may have as it relates to that. And then secondly, we will continue our conversation that we had at the last commission meeting around our efforts to improve policing and some of the reform strategies we discussed previously. So with that, I'll ask if our Emergency Management Administrator, Ms. Allison Farrell, will pull up the presentation and begin the briefing on the COVID. There'll be multiple presenters. And so again, at the end of the COVID briefing, we'll pause and see what questions the commission may have before going into the second half. Ms. Farrell, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, City Manager, and good morning, Commissioners. We can go to the next slide. And so we'll give an update on COVID. So as we've been doing over the last few months, utilizing our Kent County Health Department's dashboard just to provide some information of where we are in our current case numbers when it comes to COVID. So as of this morning, we are sitting at 1,143 active cases of COVID in the city of Grand Rapids and Kent County. Over the last 7 days, we did have a pretty large spike in cases here in our jurisdiction. And as you all are, I'm sure, aware, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of concern in regards to the spike of COVID cases happening across the whole United States. And one thing to note is that through some discussions with the health department that this spike that we saw in the last 7 days is due to community spread. So it is very important for all of us to be vigilant in regards to how we are operating within our community in regards to wearing masks, physical distancing, and continue our hand washing. Over last week, we were below 1,000 cases, and we are now up above 1,000 active cases here in the Kent County Grand Rapids area. And hopefully we can continue this downward trend that we've seen the last couple days. But again, it's really important for us to enforce that message of utilizing masks when we're out and physical distancing so that we can continue to slow the spread of COVID in our community. That is the update in regards to that. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief Lehman for a hot team update.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you, Allison. So this is going to be a quick update on our homeless outreach team. I want to start by saying what we have done. We've been teaming up the police and firefighters to cover our operations in the city of Grand Rapids. We've been actually experiencing some very good positive outcomes at building trust with the not only the homeless individuals, but also the shelter organizations. We've been working collaboratively with these organizations around COVID-19 issues. And we've also been actively working around with the business community around homeless issues that are happening down in the Hartside area, as well as the Monroe Center area, as well as some concentrated hotspots around the Rapid line. We're working with larger community members. So some of the things that we are doing here in the future that we need to kind of make sure we got our eye on is determining a permanent funding stream, looking at the addition and making this team a little bit more robust with adding a social worker and a mental health specialist. And at some point, we'd like to go out and really study the best practices of what successful teams are doing out there. And those are located out on the West Coast. Current issues that we're experiencing right now, we are right now trying to coordinate as we come out of this post-COVID-19 response, coordinating our schedules with between police and fire. We also want to make sure that we're defining the scope of the team's work and looking at it, whether it's a citywide versus just a Hartside neighborhood. And again, we're leaning towards more citywide issues than just concentrated in that one area. And then I just want to make you aware, we're having conversations with all of the following groups, as well as, several others, the DDA, the Rapid, Community on Homelessness, the Super Users Group, Burton Heights and Hartside neighborhood organizations. And that concludes my update for the hot team, and I'll be available for questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. So just a quick update. So as of yesterday, we shifted and we are starting to enforce metered parking again. But as in combination with that, we are also working with all the local businesses, and they can request MO2 validations. So you had previously approved in May up to $25,000 of those to be able to be offered for local businesses. And then we also have extended the free curbside pickup and drop off program through July 31st, through the end of the month. And we're working to transition all of those businesses to use that. And we had almost 2,000 on-street transactions yesterday. So there's a lot of people that are using the on-street parking and getting out and about. So that I can take any questions if you have that. Just a quick update.
We're going to hold questions, Josh, until we get through all the briefings.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. I have a quick update on social zones and then social districts, and we'll make clear those are two distinct but overlapping concepts. You authorized the establishment of social zones in late May, and 4 of those have been permitted. They're all within the Downtown Development Authority boundaries so far, and you can see them listed on this slide. We have 2 in-process applications, and we're hoping that there will be seating set up in these locations at Leonard and Quarry and Bridge and Stocking in the near future, likely within the next week or so. And then we expect at least 2 more applications, including at least one within Uptown, and the exact location or locations of those is being determined. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you a couple of photos of the social zones in use. Social zones are used not entirely evenly throughout the day. They're set up, of course, 24 hours a day and have the greatest activity during meal times, and then I guess during happy hour. You can see the one on the left was taken at the Bridge Street social zone between summer and winter. And then the one on the right in the Ionia Avenue social zone just south of Fulton. Next slide, please. I'm going to give you a bit of information on social districts. So social districts, these are distinct from social zones in that they are state authorized, whereas the social zones were authorized by you. Social districts, the legislation was approved by the Michigan legislature nearly 2 weeks ago, and it was signed by the governor last Wednesday. It is now Public Act 124. It authorizes commons areas where customers of social district permittees can mix. So these are particular classes of Michigan Liquor Control Commission license holders who, once they have a commons area established that is adjacent to their current licensed premises, they can then sell any of those beverages that they normally do, and then their customers can take them out and consume them within the social district. So think of the social zone as the seating area that the city has allowed to be established on public property or right of way. The social district is the thing that can be layered over the top of that to allow for that shared alcohol consumption space. City commission action is required both to designate the districts, the commons areas where the alcohol can be consumed, and then to sign off on the permit applications to the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. So we are anticipating preparing some resolutions for your consideration to do both of those things, to designate some initial social districts and then to sign off on some initial applications for your next meeting on the 21st. I'd note a couple key topics that we continue to work through. This is in some ways an experimental program where we need to adapt as we learn. So key topics include minimizing traffic and access impacts, even as we maximize outdoor space, and then coordinating social zones, those shared spaces, with restaurant-specific spaces, some of which are adjacent to each other. So we need to keep those separate and make sure that people understand when they're moving from one to the other. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Assistant City Manager Doug Matthews.
Mr. Matthews, if you're talking, we cannot hear you. While he's coming on, I'll go ahead and cover the slide for him. So as many of you are aware, we've been in conversations with Art Prize around their plans to cancel the event this fall. And as a result, additional conversations occurred with other members of our community about having some type of event, perhaps not the same magnitude or the same way in which we've hosted Art Prize in the past, but having some kind of fall event to help with reactivation, but doing so in a very safe manner. And we've been in conversations with the DGRI, one of our partners, as well as members of the art community, as well as the business community about a 5-week series of events that we're anticipating to occur in September, October. The plans are still in progress. There'll be a conversation tomorrow at the DDA meeting. And right now it's centered around some kind of bridge fall special event series or festival. And you'll see the components of art, music, culture, and community. We'll also figure out plans are in place for how do we feature some of the art that has recently occurred due to the recovering there is Mr. Matthews.
Here I am.
All right. So why don't you pick up, I'll finish this. So plans around a way to pick up use some of the art that's occurred through the renovation and art depicted on murals and boards. And so I'll pitch it over to Mr. Matthews and let him continue the brief.
Sure. Yeah. So there's already plans in place. The collective that worked on the Windows project are planning some activities to display those boards and coordinate some kind of an auction or sale. So we want to make sure that we incorporate that as well. And it may tie in as kind of a kickoff to the 5 weeks that we're talking about. We've met over the last 2 weeks with our event organizers, our cultural event organizers, our music and arts event organizers, just to pitch the possibilities and get them thinking about whether it's one thing that they can do or whether it's a series of things that they can do, what that might look like. And what that might look like in a way where you've got some might be scheduled activities within social zones or open outdoor spaces, and some of them might be just incidental activities that you encounter as you're navigating the community. So, as I mentioned, we're focusing on outdoor spaces, parks, and our social zones. We're hopeful that we'll have some additional social zones deeper into the neighborhoods by the time the events kick off. And we've already got commitments from a number of those groups, including local spins, the Public Museum, several of our music event organizers, our Mexican Festival, the African American Arts and Music Festival, Glimpse of Africa, the Asian Pacific Festival, our Swing Dance Society, and a number of others. So it's shaping up to be a kind of spontaneous and interesting combination of events that really highlight all that's great about Grand Rapids, but also gives us an opportunity to celebrate all of the things that we haven't had an opportunity to celebrate over the summer. So if you can imagine a 5-week mashup of everything that we normally do over a 4-month period during the summer, that's the vision. And we'll have more coming forward in terms of creative and specific programming, but we wanted to share this with you uh, first. And as Mark mentioned, it's going to be shared with the DDA tomorrow as we continue to formulate those plans.
Hello, the Grow 1000 Youth and Employment Initiative is coming together quite well, thanks to a large team of city employees from a variety of departments that have been working to get it off the ground. 82% of our initial applicants are persons of color, with well over the majority of those applicants being under the age of 17. So the program is for youth ages 15 to 21, but we have a large pool of those who are under age 17. We have 437 applicants that are scheduled to complete the 5-hour pre-employment training prior to being placed with an employer, and are on track to finalize employment documents. To date, we have 65 businesses, organizations, and even individuals who have sponsored placements or are providing jobs for placement. This is in comparison to 40 youth that we employed last year. We will continue to process those applicants and get them ready for employment this week as well as into next week. Trainings are continuing through next week as well, the pre-employment training, and we will continue to place youth beyond next week as well. The initial placements will start for employment on July 13th, and then we will hope to expand and continue placements into the fall.
Thank you, Ms. Bohat. So, Commissioners, this concludes the first part of the briefing. We'll pause here to see if there's any questions or comments about any of the material that's been shared so far. I want to express my appreciation to all of the staff who's been working on this, in addition to the many other things we're doing as an organization to assist our community and make sure that we're safe, and also reactivating appropriately to re-stimulate our economy. So we'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Great. Thank you, City Manager, and all of the city staff. I know you've been working hard on all of these efforts. I just have a couple of questions, and then it looks like Commissioner Moody has one, so I'll turn to him. So my first question is around the social districts. And I'm just curious if city, just because of timing and how often we meet, if the city commission can give authority to our city manager to do those approvals, or if they have to come back before the city commission. So that's one question. And then my other question, maybe Chief Lehman can answer this. In regards to the homeless outreach team, I do think it's really important, similar to some of our other conversations around responding differently and more effectively to individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. I do think that we need to add someone or maybe even a team that have expertise in mental health to help with the HOT team. So I'm curious who from the mental health field is helping us develop that and coming up with ideas and options.
So,
Okay, Commissioner, hold on, Chief Lemon. I'm going to staff and commissioners. If you're not speaking, please mute your mics. We're getting a little interference, Mayor, while you were talking. So why don't we'll start with the last, since Chief Lemon started weighing in, and then Mr. Canfield, you can take the next question.
thank you. Yeah, that's an important part of the combination of this team, and that conversation is really at the very beginning phases right now. So we have not engaged, other than just knowing that that's an integral component of the team makeup in the future. We have not engaged in any like deep conversations along those lines with any organizations within the city.
Mayor, I intend to, we have our policy briefing tomorrow. This is one of the items that's on the agenda for both Chief Lehman and Chief Payne. And I'd like to begin our external conversations with the county first, the health department, and meeting with the county administrator and talk about what collaborative efforts we could have in that vein, and then also then begin branching outside of governmental entities to see, in terms of the professional provider community and nonprofits, see what roles they might be able to play. We've mentioned this before. I mentioned it in particular some of our homeless providers, and the conversations before, as I discussed, it was having a dedicated person, not somebody who can come 2, 3, 4 hours later, but on the spot, who can be a second responder like our staff at the ready. And so that requires either staffing internally or contracted, committed person to be available immediately upon need. And when I had those conversations with some of our providers, it was a resource issue at the time. And so we'll have to continue to work through that.
And City Manager, just some follow up to that. It would be nice to also get an update on where we are in our conversations. I know this is a larger community collaborative looking at a crisis response center. And so it would be nice. I know Chief Lehman, you've been a part of those conversations, as has Chief Payne, along with the county and our hospital partners. But it might be nice. I see that as those two issues as intertwined. So it'd be nice to get an update on where we are as a.
I think Mary, I think you're froze again, but we'll continue those conversations with our county administrator. All right, Mr. Canfield, you want to answer the second question about the authority? I believe the mayor asked that the commission could potentially delegate, and we looked into that and we worked with the law department on that.
We did look into that, and of course our desire at this time is to move as quickly as we can, consistent with the authority that's in place. The legislation uses the phrase governing body to refer to who can establish districts and approve applications. And the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, which will ultimately have to sign off on the districts and then the individual business permits, they've designed all their forms in such a way where they clearly require a resolution documenting those approvals. And so in light of those things, we thought, well, the risk of a delegated approach would be rejection by the MLCC based on not strictly adhering to those requirements. So we didn't want to take that risk. We think it's a legally sound approach to have the commission take those actions. I would also note there are a few things that have to happen before a district can be used. We have to have some signage created. The businesses actually have to have special cups created that have the name of the district and the name of the business on the cup. So I think those businesses that want to use these can use the next couple weeks to prepare those items.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Canfield. All right, Commissioner Moody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have just 3 short questions. One is the social zoning. I need to know, is masks going to be required since we have an increase in COVID coming up in the state of Michigan? And then 2, when you talk about minimizing traffic, are you talking about sending traffic through a different route, and what would that look like? And then 3 on the Grow 1000 is the applications closed for individuals to apply for jobs.
So I'll just real briefly, yes, we're going to require all the same public health expectations around PPE, masks, sanitation, both of the employer and the public. Those expectations won't change. We will, I think we've been trying to be deliberate about signage, and if there's anything else that you might want to add to that, Mr. Canfield, but there's no change in expectations around public health and safety in the social zones. Is that sufficient? The other question around traffic, can you remind me of your inquiry again, Commissioner Moody, the specifics of your inquiry?
Are you going to when you talk about traffic, we're talking about rerouting cars through the social zoning or what?
Yep, there's a traffic mitigation plan that we have. In some instances, there's a removal of parking lanes. Sometimes there's removals of actual a one lane of the road. I think like on Monroe Center, but we've closed the entire street. And so all of those are pre-approved for traffic mitigation and safety with our combined departments. And not sure, have we had any complaints thus far, Mr. Canfield, on traffic flow?
Yeah, we do get some complaints. They've ranged from complaints where a suggestion is made and then a minor adjustment is when appropriate made by traffic safety, all the way to I just don't like this and I wish you wouldn't do it. And so we make adjustments where they can where they're warranted based on those. I would say that the general feedback is positive.
It is an inconvenience, but it is a better alternative for many businesses of not having any outdoor utilization for service. And lastly, around the application, so the application period is closed. Even though we have 437 people who have completed the process, there are still many other people who have not completed that. They're still in process. So we could have more than that number. But those are the applicants that have moved forth to the next phase on their own. A lot of people expressed interest initially and did not follow through with the application materials. So, but we will. Our goal is to employ 1,000 youth, and so this is not just a summer program. We've changed it from a summer employment program to a youth opportunities program initiative. And so we'll continue even in the fall. We'll work with the school district to see if we had discussions yesterday around creative ways and in how we could partner with the school in helping older youth mentor or tutor and do it in a paid component and where it's not just someone who can afford to do it financially. And so there are lots of creative ways that we're trying to expand the program. But yes, we're continuing to process many applications that we've received so far. I think that number is, there's probably another 450 unprocessed applications. Is that correct, Ms. Lohud?
Yes, that's correct. We had a total of 903 eligible applicants.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear, what was left. I know you got the 437. But that 437 is ready to start on July the 13th. Is that correct?
That is not
Have they
correct.
been, that's not correct. So they haven't been placed in their job placements yet.
Those are individuals who are scheduled for training. Some of those have completed training and all of their paperwork. Some are scheduled for training, but have not completed as of yet. Training is continuing through this week and into next week. And some of those individuals may not have completed their required employment documentation. So there's follow-up going on, making sure that youth are making sure that they are actually completing that training and getting in the missing documentation. So a city team has been doing a lot of outreach, making sure that we can get that squared away for as many as possible.
I'm sorry, Connie. I just need one more question answered. What does the training consist of?
It's a 5-hour training. There are a variety. It's more of the soft skills for employment. I don't have that list right in front of me, but can let you know. We have a number of trainers that are coming in. It's a virtual training over a 5-hour duration. And I think there's one component of that they are able to do on their own as well.
Commissioners, and it's also like a new employee orientation program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions on this portion? Commissioner Essie?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple of questions about the hot team. I had asked a question in fiscal, but I wanted to bring it to this body about our efforts around cooling centers. I think at least Commissioner Jones and I have gotten a couple of questions about that. I'm sure others have as well, especially as I think these 90-degree temps are going to continue for at least a couple more days. So update, Connie, Ms. Bohach did provide an update. But if that could be done again, I think that would be helpful for those who are watching. I to echo your sentiments, Mayor, about the mental health crisis piece. I think I'm glad to hear that moving forward. I'm fully supportive of that. And then my question was also back to Ms. Bohach about the summer or the youth opportunity program. It would be good to know as we continue on. I appreciate the numbers and statistics to know what some of those barriers are. I'm guessing some of it might be, documentation, proving eligibility to work in the United States. I'm not sure what it is, but if there are some of those administrative pieces, I'd like to understand that as well. 'Cause that's what we typically find sort of with adults and workforce development. And then I just wanted to say to Mr. Canfield, thank you very much for your efforts as we worked with the social zones. I did have a business on Monroe Center who was working to repair the insides of their building. So after May 30th, their sprinkler system went off, completely flooded their building. I'm totally forgetting their name now, but it's an optical doctor, and they were really working to get all of the debris out of their building and try to start to repair multiple things. And Mr. Canfield and the team worked very hard to, both balance the desire for the social zones, which this business was supportive of, but also needed to have better access to their facility so that they can unload those materials. So while there have been concerns, I feel like the concerns have been resolved in a very timely fashion. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any other questions or comments on this?
So Mayor, I'm sorry, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
So Ms. Bohach, could you turn your camera on, Michael, and just give us a brief update about the questions that were asked during city this morning around the homeless population?
So
cooling centers, I think is specifically what Commissioner asked about.
right. So typically for warm weather, extreme heat and extreme cold, the shelters are changing their hours for access because there's typically times during the day that you're not allowed to be in them, and there's different locations. So shelters are open and available so that people can get relief out of the heat. And the hot team or Chief Lehman may want to provide more details about that. But basically, shelters remain open so folks can get relief. In response to some of the questions about youth employment, really, I think what's necessary for most, what's missing is the I-9 form. And our HR team is diligently working to get that information. And they're also working with the schools to get the work permits that are required for certain of the applicants. And then a colleague was nice and just sent me the list for the training. So I appreciate that. There is an overview of expectations for employment. There's workplace etiquette as part of that, dressing for success workshop, stress management, and then of course instruction in terms of of how to submit their timesheets and how they will access their payroll. And then, of course, encouraging them, if they hadn't already, to get their documentation into the city so that they can be placed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions on this section before we move on? All right, seeing none, I'll turn it back to our city manager for the next section.
Thank you, Mayor. So we'll proceed into our next portion of our briefing, which is related to our updates on police reform. And this is a continued conversation from the briefing that we had on a few weeks ago rather, on our efforts to improve our relationships with our community. And this is in response to not only what is happening nationally around the country due to the recent murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, but also a look into what is happening within our community and our history of relationships between the police and community. We've tried to make sure that we are attentive and responsive to what is happening both nationally and locally. And there are many people that are very concerned, who care about this community, who care about improving the quality of life for all of our people in our community, but particularly for people who've been disproportionately negatively impacted by law enforcement, to include communities of color. And so in doing so, we've listened to the voices of commission, the voices of public staff, both sworn and non-sworn, as well as experts who have been in the field. And while there are varied opinions from everyone as to how we should proceed, we've heard conversations around defunding, and that means different things to different people, whether it is reallocating funding or abolishing the police department. We've heard the need to improve reforming our police department. I've heard people who've expressed concerns that the department is under-resourced, and they're concerned about taking away those resources in a way that contributes to the lack of safety of our community. And so what's clear to me is that regardless of what the suggested approach is, people want to see meaningful change and to make sure that there is no disproportionate impact or unfair or biased impact on policing in people of color, and particularly here lately the conversation around African Americans. And so we know that this is not a sprint; it's a journey, but we have to take some initial steps, and otherwise we'll continue to either reflect on what we have done or just contemplate what we should be doing. And so, in doing that, it's important for me to make sure that our initial steps are deliberate, it's intentional, and it's one that is sustainable. And so I sent a memo, it should be released today, that outlines both comments from me and the chief around our efforts around reform. And what I'll do in this presentation is to go through some of the highlights of that communication, and then come back at the end. You'll hear from me, you'll hear from our chief financial officer around our budgeting. And I know a lot of people have inquired around how the department is budgeted, and as well as our police chief, our oversight office, and our equity office. But I just want to begin now with the slides around our strategic plan, just to say that this has been a conversation, an issue of having safe community that is not being discussed in a vacuum. We have prioritized this as our strategic priority. And as you'll see, I won't go through all the details, but as you'll see, many of the conversations that we're having today around mental health awareness, those are our strategic initiatives that are in our plan, or identifying these systemic causes and disparate outcomes where there's not the fair administration of justice. Those are things that are in the plan that we are have committed to in ensuring that there are good outcomes and making sure that we train employees to be culturally appropriate in diversifying our workforce. Next slide. Next slide, please. And even using voices of community. This is not new language. This is built and baked into our strategic plan. And around our values of accountability, which includes transparency, collaboration, which includes doing it with community, not community, and equity, and making sure that it is a safe community for all residents here in Grand Rapids, but particularly with the understanding that it has been a difficult experience for people of color, and do it in a way that is different from the past. We want to build on our past. We want to honor what we've done in the past, but we want to look for new ways of trying to do this forward. And there's a last value that's not on there in a sustainable way. And whenever we do anything, particularly around our fiscal structure, we want to make sure that it's not, and when I speak of sustainability, not just environmentally sustainable, but fiscally sustainable. And next slide. And so the memo that I shared and briefing that we shared on June 10th was around our commitment for accountability, reform, and equitable change. And this is built upon the pillars of 21st century policing that has those 6 components, but also aligns it. Everything that we propose is aligned with our strategic plan, our values, as well as those principles for community policing. Next slide. And so I know that this table is a little difficult to see for some, but what you'll see on the left side are those 21 items that we shared at last meeting. And there's 4 more that have been added. And so we continue to learn our way forward. And if we would have paused and just implemented what some had asked for us to do when we first started to have the conversation, this list would not be as comprehensive as it is now. But we have the initiatives on the left side, and you'll see the categories, whether it is looking at police policy on use of force, which are the first few items, whether it's banning shirt codes or looking at a de-escalation or banning shooting at moving vehicles or no-knock warrants. Those are commitments you'll hear the chief talk about, that we are committed to make those policy changes around use of force. And we'll come back in August the 11th. We need to give the department the time to procedurally make sure those policies are correctly written and researched, so that officers can be aware, but also that we can appropriately have the levels of accountability in the department. The other suggestions that came forth was around structural changes to the police department, and whether that includes redirecting funding, reallocating funding, or defunding, however the conversation is. And those are things that you'll see today that have been brought forth. And this is not a surprise. I said last time that I'm unable to commit to reducing the departmental budget by $9 million, given the fact we've already had a significant reduction in the police department's budget of $1.1 million. However, I've gone back. The police chief, I knew this when we made these commitments last time. The police chief had already looked at his budget, and of course, they would prefer to maintain their budget as status quo, but given the urgency of the need to have an initial step, the department has come back and has identified another $400,000 that would be able to fund an additional position in the Oversight office. That is a valued community resource. That was a suggestion that was made, but that suggestion is in line with our plans. Prior to COVID, we were looking at resourcing that department with more. We just had restraints on funding and weren't able to do so at the time, but we've gone back, we've made readjustments, reevaluations, and we are able to add a position there. We're able to add a couple of more positions that's in concert with many of the studies that this city commission has commissioned regarding deployment and the civilianization of some of the positions in the police department that are very administrative. And so these budget considerations would allow for an additional position in the Oversight Office, as well as additional position in our communications office that will help with police engagement and communication, but be embedded in the department, and also a position that will help with some of the executive administrative issues and oversight within the department from a civilian perspective, executive management. You'll see some of the other efforts relating to improving our efforts on recruiting and hiring and diversifying the workforce, community engagement, transparency. We've heard even from the civil unrest when we had brought to our attention, we had identification of name badges. Every officer has a badge, and the chief could talk about this more, but in their fatigue uniforms where many were having to respond on site, they were not able to have embroidered names, but we are working through that to improve transparency, to looking at elements of planning, whether it is the OPA's plan or the police department's plans. Those will be ongoing, as well as training. And you've heard around youth empowerment and doing it in a way that's differently through our Grow 1000, and you've heard the update on that. And lastly, on the research that we are continuing to do regarding how to be more transparent even within our bargaining, as well as looking at additional subpoena power for the Civilian Appeals Board, and an update on where we are, where the Michigan Department of Civil Rights is regarding their investigation into the city of Grand Rapids. And you'll see to the far right when we plan to continue to have those discussions. These are not easy matters. These are issues that take time and thoughtful deliberation to bring to good conclusions. Next slide, please. So I won't go into detail. I know the spreadsheet was hard to see, but for the public, these are the committed future briefings that we will do. You'll hear today what we've committed to do in the first 30 days and around some of the changes that we committed to do. Next slide. And then on the 21st, as I outlined before, we'll come back and we'll have an update on some of the other topics around accountability, the strategic plan. Both of the Oversight Office and the chief can give an update on his progress as well. And then the law department will provide some legal advice to the city commission on where we stand with the Department of Civil Rights and the subpoena power of the appeals board. Next slide. And then finally, the final version of the use of force policies. We hope that the chief will have those in place. And those are these days are 60 days from when we initially committed to do that, as well as updating some of our work on staffing and diversification and transparency. And you'll hear an update later about the plans that we have for our performance metrics dashboard and more open data. So with that, what I will do now, I'll pause and talk more about, next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Did I miss one? Yes, and go back to the previous one. I'm sorry, my apologies. And so, and we'll continue the updates on the strategic plan and the other programs that were announced from the Oversight Office as well as our Equity Office. So now, can you advance, please? Thank you. So again, I wanted to take a moment today to talk about the conversation around defunding the police department, and that has meant different things to different people. But here lately in the context, it's meant now reducing the police department's budget, the general operating fund portion, from what is around 38% to 32%. And so with that, I've asked our CFO, Ms. Molly Claren, to provide a little bit more context and detail so that both commissioners and the public can have an understanding of where we have been and where we are regarding to funding the police department and the various staffing levels in a historical context. So, Ms. Claren?
Thank you, City Manager. We'll start out with just the city charter language here. We discussed this at our last commission meeting, how that 32% of general operating fund was established for dedication to police services. Keep in mind, this was established as a floor, not necessarily a ceiling on expenditures. So leaves room for discretion above that amount, what the commission or the administration deems that we want to do programmatically. So next slide. This shows in the scope of that 32% chart minimum requirement how we've performed over the past 15 years. You can see in that first 5-year block, I want you to keep in mind this was during time period of the Great Recession. So the general fund shrunk and not necessarily in team with the size of the police department. We'll discuss that more on the next slide, but I wanted to be able to explain how we got to that 42.3% peak. It just depended on what the priorities of the commission was at that point in time. As we did make reductions, public safety obviously always a priority. In 2011, we removed the dispatch division from the police department, put it in a separate fund. So you'll see that's one of the reasons for that dip between 2010 into 2011. And then as we go forward over the next 10 years, you'll see in 2021, we're currently budgeted at 38.6%. Relative to where we were 10 years ago, that's roughly the same, if not a bit lower. Next slide. So we have 3 different graphs here showing the first one on the upper left shows the growth of the police general fund budget over time. Again, if you take out that first 5-year block, because the numbers do get skewed between 2006 to 2011 with the juggling around due to the Great Recession, just from 2011 to 2021, it's a 26% growth there. Now, relative to the total general fund, if over that same 10-year period, there's a 29% growth. So it just in the last 10 years, general fund has grown more than the police general fund budget. But if you look down at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see that anomaly with those first 5 years, 2006 to 2011. Again, as the department was built back, public safety was a major priority then. But then you can see as we go towards the next 2 5-year periods, so 2011 to 2016, the blue bars represents the police department, 11% versus general fund's 13% growth, and then over the last 5 years, they've been in concert with one another. So next slide. The total police general fund budget is 55.1 million. You'll see 80% of that is dedicated to personnel. 7% of the budget is non-sworn, while 73% is dedicated to the sworn personnel. The personnel budget is 44.1 million, so it's the biggest slice of the pie there. Wages is the main driver, followed by pension at 7.9 million, and then healthcare at 6.4. The other main part of the budget is the other services and charges, 9.9 million. These are things like contractual services. But as we examine that, we realize the police department doesn't have a whole lot of discretionary funding beyond their current obligations. So more than half of that 9.9 million is already designated to intergovernmental charges and things like that. Next slide. So as far as the police staffing history, you'll see in the upper right, it's broken down that you'll see in 2006, we had 1.75 officers per 1,000 people, down to 2019, where it's 1.47. What this means is as our population has grown, police officers have decreased by about 12%. So less we have less officers dedicated to a greater population over time. Exactly, it's a 16% reduction in the number of officers per 1,000 residents. So, and then in the bottom left, oh, did we go forward? Bottom left graph, thank you. This shows the blue bar being our general fund authorized officers, or what we also call sworn officers. In 2006, we had 337. To 2021, where it's at 292, you'll see a slight gray bar in there. That's where we try to take advantage of things like the COPS grants, where we can get grant funding to help supplement our force size. So you'll see we relied on this heavily coming out of the Great Recession, 2011 through 2018. You know, we had an upwards of 19 officers under these grant programs. So it was a great tool for the force to use. And then you'll see in the yellow is the general fund civilian positions. Next slide, please. So when we think about the general fund police budget, keep in mind it's 1.88% less than fiscal year 20. We had that little over $1 million decrease in this year's budget. As we look at the 15-year experience, the general fund staffing, sworn and civilian police staffing, is at 88% of the 2006 staffing level. So you see that in the chart to the right. Also, as far as the budget goes, if you do an average of year-to-year, average of every year-to-year comparison, it's 2.68% per year for the police general fund budget, whereas the general fund grew year over year by an average of 1.93%. So again, that 2006 to 11 dip, some of that is attributed to the reduction in budget from the Great Recession, but also the removal of the dispatch. But comparing 2011 forward 10 years, we are at the same level of staffing, but again, over a greater population of the city. And our next slide is, I'm going to hand it over to Chief Payne for his comments.
Thank you, Molly. And thank you, Mayor, Commission, City Manager, for having me this morning. When I was appointed police chief, my number one priority was and still remains the safety of this community and all the community members that are in it. What I want to do is walk you through some slides that we prepared and then have some comments at the end. But what we've done, my guiding principles, a lot of this is listening to the community and also the several different studies that have been commissioned that we have followed. We've invested over $4 million in studies and also some of the recommendations that we've heard over the last 5 years. So we're using these studies to help guide us on how or plans for the department. First one is a 12-point plan. 11 of the 12 recommendations are completed or in progress. The Lambert traffic stop study, 11 of the 12 recommendations are completed, in progress, or under review. Then the 21st Century Policing Policy Review Task Force, 34 out of the 36 recommendations are completed or in process or under consideration. Staffing and deployment, all 22 recommendations are completed, in process, or under consideration. The city's strategic plan, 4 primary goals are completed or in progress. Next slide, please. Some of the accomplishments, 86 of the 90 recommendations have been completed, are in process, or being evaluated, which are 96% of the recommendations. Some of the recommendations, for example, were for ongoing training. That's why they're in progress, but we have been doing them and we will continue to evaluate and find to continue those recommendations as we move forward. But out of that last, for example, since we started last 4 years, internal affairs complaints have dropped by 66% in the last 4 years, while internal complaints have risen by 18%. We're The external are where the public have made complaints. You see the 66% decrease. While 18% shows where we are holding our officers accountable. Those complaints have risen by complaints being initiated internally within the department, which goes to our accountability. The staffing and deployment study suggested GRPD had adequate staffing and provided the hiring of more non to deploy sworn staff, redeploy sworn staff, and not responding to lower priority costs such as traffic crashes and alarms. And also revising the sponsored police academy classes that led to some of the most diverse recruit classes in department history. We currently have 14 members attending the Grand Valley Academy, and they are due to complete. It was delayed, but they're due to complete that later this year. Next slide, please. Some of the implementations that we have done, just a few of them, but the body worn camera system that was recommended from one of the studies has been implemented. We've had that in place close to 5 years. The foreign national policy is another example that we came up with. Our youth interaction policy, that is a policy that we created through the 21st Century Policing. Talked to Ron Davis, who was part of that group. He's indicated to me that that policy is being replicated throughout the country as a model of how to engage with youth. The Eternal Victim Specialist was created. That's a civilian employee that, as part of the 21st Century Policing Pillar 6 is wellness of police officers. We've added that person into our program. The officer wellness coordinator. We've added that also into as a civilian employee. Let me back up. I'm sorry. The internal victims service specialist is actually an external person that we utilize with victims of crime, that we work with victims of violent crimes that go out into the community, make contact with victims, and try to make sure that they're getting the services aside from police that the victims of serious crimes need. And then the officer wellness coordinator, that's where the Pillar 6 of the 21st Century Police recommendation is. We have to have well officers that's both physically and mentally able to perform their duties. We've been in support of the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, not just financially, but in support of their mission to have another layer of accountability for the police department. We created the afternoon weekend community policing specialists. That was something that was committed to. We did that by using sworn civilians, hiring them in place of them, and the conversion of sworn to non-sworn positions. Next slide, please. We've also, for transparency, the initial launch will be August 11th. We've worked with Becky Jo and her team to have a reform metric dashboard. It will be incorporated in the City Key metric dashboard, which will include approximately 22 metrics from the city's strategic plan. More data and disaggregation by demographics will be added. Initial metrics will include number of beats covered 24/7, 365, percentage of residents that feel safe, number of community events the police participate in, and number of sworn and non-sworn personnel that participate, crime statistics, officer and non-sworn staffing numbers, and demographics for existing police personnel, new hires, and our turnover rate. Next slide, please. We also like to show, this is a snapshot of 7 other communities similar in population Where we stand as far as officers per 1,000, the number of sworn, our number of sworn officers, and then the annual budget of how we compare. Of Madison, Wisconsin, Glendale, California, Huntington Beach, Salt Lake City, Amarillo, Texas, Yonkers, New York, and Aurora, Illinois. And you see those averages. The population is close to 208,000. They average 1.91 officers per 1,000 residents, with an average of 398 sworn officers with an average budget of $80 million. With little over 200,000, we have 1.48 officers per 1,000, 297 sworn with an annual budget of $55 million. Next slide, please. And then Molly touched on it, but our current historical crime data, as you can see, there's been reductions from 2006 to 2019 in murder, assaults, violent crimes, part 1 crimes, and part 2 crimes in the upper right box. But what we've done also is compare January to June of 2019 to 2020, and there's been significant increases in our murder rate, aggravated assaults, arson. There's a few that are down. That's in the part 1 crime category. Part 2 with an overall increase of 9.0% in part 1. The changes in part 2 is more encouraging with a decrease of a little over 7% overall in those crimes. One thing that is not captured in part 1 and part 2 crime or statistics are the weapons firing. We are currently trending toward 80% over our incidents from 2019 so far in 2020 of 80% increase in weapons firing. That's basically guns being shot that are reported to us or that we're aware of. And then the lower right-hand box shows that the decline in the overall rate since 2006. Next slide, please. So what does a 9.5 reduction would mean? Why these? A 9.5 reduction, which would be take us to 32% of the general operating fund, would significantly impact our services and outcomes, including an increase in response time and not responding to low priority costs for service. The budget reduction would affect equipment, training, community engagement, and staffing. Layoffs would start with 27 interns. And we've utilized our intern program as our grow our own pipeline. So that would be affected, it would be eliminated. And possibly non-sworn personnel. But 75 to 80 sworn officers would have to be laid off. The loss of 75 to 80 officers, about 26% of our sworn personnel, leaving roughly 217, 222 officers. The layoffs would include department with most recent and diverse recruit classes. As I mentioned, we have 14 out at the academy now. It would certainly get into the number of academy sponsor or the sponsor classes that we've had over the last 3 summers. The rough cost of that is a little over $300,000 that we paid in tuition to have those officers trained. It will certainly impact those being part of the department. But it would also, looking at the reduce our special response team, our community engagement unit, traffic, detective, vice, and community policing would be reduced or eliminated altogether. Fewer detectives and vice personnel will result in longer investigative times. Fewer or limited SRT personnel will result in needing outside agencies for critical incidents. A reduction in workforce would limit the ability to participate in special events. Our current staffing covers 86% of department beats. The reduction would impact the strategic plan that calls for 24/7 of all of our beats being covered. And again, the response times and lower priority calls would be impacted. The staffing and deployment study, 21st CP report, recommended strategies and initiatives that relied on hiring additional non-sworn personnel to redeploy sworn officers more priority function. We're researching ways to utilize. One of the things that we're researching right now is, I believe it was raised earlier, to utilize behavioral health experts such as social workers on calls that could benefit from that expertise. The department will be looking at more strategies in the future of finding grants and other funding resources. I believe that is certainly something that we need to look into, and having that component along with our sworn officers in addressing some of those issues that come up with people with behavioral health issues. And also, we committed to having a Chief Community Police Advisory Council. You'll see before you the 6 that are initial members of that group: Ms. Tracy Brain, Mr. Marcos Bonus, Javon Fields, Willie Golston, Larry Johnson, and Raynard Ross. We were able to meet last week. We're looking to meet next week. We're also intending to add new members to this group. And we're having those discussions with this group. This is another way of having transparency. I will ask this group to look at such things as our policies as we develop them and revise them, to get input from the community on how the community is looking to be policed. So we will have additions coming in the future. Next slide. So what we've done, some of the structural changes, we've identified funding for 3 essential non-sworn civilian positions: the Chief of Staff, 1 additional position in Oversight, Office of Oversight and Public Accountability has been redirected. Public information will be housed in the Office of Community Communications and assist in improving communications on public safety, and which resulted in close to 400,000 net reduction in the police department fund to fund these positions. A budget amendment will be considered by the City Commission today to make these adjustments, and the hiring process can begin immediately after the budget amendment would be approved. With that said, if you go back, please. We are committed. We're hearing the community, and all these changes are things that we're looking to do or have done based on community input, the studies that we've had. And as the city manager mentioned, we are open, like looking at the behavioral specialists and adding that to our department. We're open to the changes, and we're looking to do those. We will have a strategic plan update, or actually present it at the August 11th commission meeting, to see the direction that we're looking to take the department in. But I can't emphasize enough, the $9 million reduction will have a radical change on what we're attempting to do at this point. But with that said, again, we're open to the change that have been asked for. We have to do it responsibly and make sure that they're aligned with the safety of the community. I've looked at this from a very high perspective and giving you an overview of what the impact of the department would be. I have not drilled down extensively and not asked my staff to drill down extensively to show exactly where those changes are. But the reality, a $9 million reduction would result in layoffs in this department. And that would be a radical change on how we deliver services, going to the safety of the community. And I believe Mr. Davis has the next slide.
Thank you, Chief, and good morning, commissioners. In the wake of the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and many others, many cities have recently begun having a discussion about police and community relations and police reform. And many of those conversations have highlighted the need for immediate changes in those departments. And Grand Rapids is positioned differently because unlike many of those cities, we've been having the conversation about police and community relations for some time, and we've been working to make some of those changes. So some of the immediate changes that are being made by other cities have already been made in Grand Rapids, and a good example of those are body cameras. So we see in other cities, immediate reforms saying we need body cameras right now, or we see creations of community engagement units, which are some of the things that have already been done in partnership with community and our department and creating change in Grand Rapids. With that being said, we still need to make change. There are still things that need to be done in Grand Rapids, but the items that have been identified by the city manager are a great start towards that change that needs to be made. And I believe that those changes will not only help us in the area of police and community relations, but help us to have the type of department that we want to have in Grand Rapids. There are other things that we've been talking about, like reimagining policing. That's something that we've heard in community. And those are things that need to be considered, but they need to be considered deliberately. They need to be considered in a way that takes into account all of the factors that go into that. They can't be overnight decisions or decisions that are just made haphazardly. It has to be made in a way that can make sustainable, lasting change. And that's really the goal as we pursue justice. We're not in a pursuit of a quick fix that checks the box. We have to be in pursuit of lasting change that leads towards justice. And I think a great example of that deliberate type change came in the creation of the Oversight Office when the city manager came to Grand Rapids and created the Oversight Office in response to 21st century policing and the vision that he had for what oversight would look like in Grand Rapids. That's an example of deliberate change. That wasn't an overnight decision. That wasn't something that just happened haphazardly, but it was something that happened in partnership with community that can help us to create change in the community. And that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about now and provide you with an update on. So one of those commitments was to identify funding to expand the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. And as far as the status update, Chief Payne has indicated, and the manager has indicated that they found funding from the police department budget for one new position in the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. And the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement has identified trends for agencies that oversee police departments of allocations of no less than 1% of police salaries or budgets for those type of agencies. And this change here would fund OPA at a rate of $331,000, $331,000, which is about 1.3% of the police department salaries. And that's an increase of $331,548 for the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. So that is a significant increase. And as now, we have a functioning Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. In time, we'll be able to help make those important decisions that are ahead of us. So a budget amendment is before the City Commission on today, and the hiring process for that position can begin immediately after that is considered and hopefully approved by the City Commission. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Stout.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. So working with the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, the police department and other departments, we're looking through the lens of equity for our training. I will be releasing an RFP for proposals for a variety of trainings, which folks can respond to the entire RFP or portions of the RFP, depending on their expertise in training in the topic. We did start a 4-part series this past month in June for city staff to process the current events, discuss issues of colorism, privilege, power, and specific next steps. We've done this in partnership with several departments, but also facilitated by our friends with the National Equity Project and local wellness experts to help with that processing. We've also resumed our Equity Foundations, which is for all city staff, in a new digital format using our WebEx technology to cover basic terminology on what is diversity, what does it mean when we say equity and justice, equality, inclusion, and other key concepts. It's important to have shared language so we can have deeper, more real conversations as we pursue justice. So again, I'm releasing an RFP this Friday and excited to put a training plan together to present to you on or before August 11th. Next slide. I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stout. So, commissioners, I'll just conclude and I won't spend time on this. You've seen our commitments, I heard the commitments to the presentation. I'm reminding you and the public of the things that we committed to and by when for meaningful reform. Mr. Kane, if you can just take the presentation down. I'll just conclude with these remarks that we are committed. My staff has been working on change since June the 1st. And it's been the subject of every day and almost every meeting. And it has involved a lot of intentional conversations with many in the police department, law department, and community members, those who are willing to get engaged. What my commitment is continue to do strategically what we've said we've done, accelerate in areas where we can, but I cannot responsibly as city manager recommend any further reductions in the police department's budget beyond what I've proposed today. So given again the $1.1 million reduction that the department's realized in fiscal year 21 from fiscal year 20, and the proposed amendment that's before you is almost equivalent to 63% of their overtime budget, 1.5 million. That's a significant reduction. And the reality is the demands for the reduced police services are often resulting in the need to have more staffing at some of these events. And so I just think we need to be very, very cautious in both our commitments and our comments and be very deliberate about what we can and cannot do. Other cities who are making these commitments have not gone through their annual budget process yet. And so what you're hearing is some combination of their efforts to defund along with making adjustments to economic contraction that has already passed due to COVID. Well, we've already done that. So our $1.1 million was not veiled as anything else but the reduction due to economic shrinkage, where in other communities, they're having to do both. And so some of those reductions that they're making will have needed to be made regardless if there was a defunding conversation. Some are going a little bit further. And so I just would caution us to, because we went ahead of many other cities' budget process, to not think that their discussions or actions are novel to us. We've already been there and we've made tough decisions. It took this body 5 weeks to determine how to make an additional $9 million of reductions citywide. Those were very excruciating conversations beyond the 13 million. And we have not had 5 weeks of these kind of conversations. I've heard questions, well, the school district is having to reduce their budgets by $8, $9, $10 million. And why can't we reduce the police department's budget by the same amount? That's the entire school district. That's not one department. We're talking about the reduction in one department. And so, again, I think my recommendation as city manager is to not go beyond what has been proposed. And quite frankly, I'm very uncomfortable even in suggesting that, because we're 1 week into our budget and here we are making an amendment. And so I'm doing it out of the urgency and trying to find a reasonable path forward and doing it in a way that's sustainable. The reality is we may be back before you in 6 months or less at our mid-year update, not only talking about the police department budget, but many other departments' budget if our economy does not recover in the predicted manner that we estimated in the budget process. So we need to be very, very, very deliberate in our conversations and decisions. And I think what we're bringing forward today is a responsible and thoughtful path forward. So I will pause and see if there are any questions for me or any of the staff that's presented thus far.
All right, thank you, City Manager. Well, I'll start. I have a couple thoughts, and then I do have some specific questions. So first, I want to be really clear that I strongly support structural, meaningful, long-lasting police reform changes. And I think the changes and the actions before us today, they take us in that direction. Yet I think it's very apparent that they are first steps and that we still have a lot of work to do. And as the city manager said, and I think Mr. Davis said it really well, is that we need to be moving forward in a really intentional and thoughtful way. So a couple things. I'm glad to see the dashboard and that's going to go live next month. I know many of us have received questions about the police department and the budget. And as of right now, it is very difficult to find information, detailed information in an easy way, in an easy to navigate way. So I'm glad to see that that dashboard is going to come up, and I hope it's very detailed and helpful as community members want to know more about the police department and the police department budget. As I said earlier, I strongly support looking at new structures to better respond to people who are experiencing a mental health crisis and experiencing homelessness. And I want to make sure that that is one of the priority issues that we're working on over the next month and 2 months. I think we have some key partners in the community that can help us with that. Um, I think it would be good to add some of the work we're doing around prevention. We didn't touch on a lot of that today, and I know it's because we're really focused on reform and change. But to me, prevention is a significant part of the solution here. I know we do work with our neighborhood associations around crime prevention and other organizations. We've talked at length about cure violence, and I think we need to have that conversation again. And then also the work that the SAFE Task Force has been doing. They've done a lot of really good work around prevention and empowering our community to be a part of that. So it'd be nice to have in the future an update on some of that work specific to prevention. And then my last couple points in regards to accountability, I support the additional support for the Office of Oversight and Accountability. And actually, if there's needed additional support, I would support that. So I will really defer to Mr. Davis on the support that he needs for that office to be as effective as possible. Uh, when it comes to oversight and accountability, one of the key things that we've heard is around policing police and oversight and how that process takes place. And I know some of that is falls under state law and union contracts, but I think we need to keep that on the front burner as well. I believe that our current arbitration process needs to change. And again, I know that that's a legislative issue, but I think we should add that to the list of items we need to keep at the forefront when it comes to reform. And we can talk about that more with our legislative team. And then uh, my last question, specific question, and I didn't hear it referred to today, but I'm curious what our plan is for our next traffic stop study. This body committed to doing another study, and I haven't heard the plans for that. So I don't know if those have been worked out or not, but I'd like an update on that. And so, City Manager, if you want to respond to any of that, and then I'll open it up for other questions.
Well, I will simply respond to your thoughts and saying I think we and the chief concur with a lot of the sentiments that you shared earlier regarding your specific study, specific question around the traffic stop study. I think we intentionally, shortly after I was hired, said that we wanted to have more time for intervention and to see what effect intervention would have before remeasuring. And so I recall us saying that we would have at least a 2-year pause. So this would be the year that that study would commence. Because of it has always been the strategy to have that study be in many other cities where there is an oversight office. That's who leads the study. So the delay in establishing the oversight office has impacted at least some of the plans that we had earlier on. And so now I think given all of the things that we are doing, we're going to have to prioritize everything and what can reasonably get done. And so that will be part of the evaluation work. We have to do things in manageable ways. And I am concerned about us doing too much at once, but I am committed to continuing that. And so we'll be working with the chief and the Oversight Office about getting a specific plan in place for that study, whether it is an internal reevaluation or if it's a full-blown external consultant coming in. But Mr. Davis has been resource constrained from staffing to be able to do it by himself.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, other questions or comments for the chief or for city manager? Commissioner Sassi?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for the presentation. I know there was a number of individuals that presented, so thank you. One of the questions that I had was around, I think it was on page 36, was the list of those who are on this newly created advisory board for the chief. And Commissioner Repart and Commissioner Moody are probably tired of hearing me bring this up. I didn't see it on the slide, and I didn't have a chance to review it in full prior to our time together. But the conversation about how all of these boards that have very adjacent but different responsibilities as it relates to policing and policing reform in our community. So I'm thinking specifically about public safety as one of those groups. How will that interact with this new body? What does that look like? We've had some people serving. We do have some vacancies. And additionally, as it relates to some cab appointments, which I know Commissioner Lanier has recently submitted one. We have a few from the second ward, as well as our community relations. So I would like that to be part of this conversation as well, because I feel like that's something I brought up in my first commission meeting, and I don't want to lose sight of that. So that's my first question. My second question is around the budget amendment pieces. We talked a little bit about this in fiscal, and I think for me, I have a couple of questions, particularly, and I know we have this on our 7:00 meeting, especially for those watching, but in Brandon, Mr. Davis's department, I think the title is a labor relations specialist. Now, my understanding is that this is, while that is a part of HR and roles in our department, how does that fit into this new department? And how do I identify the skills that are needed in this organization? I think in the past, we've talked about things of, interacting with the public, engaging with different entities, perhaps some reporting pieces. And I, just from a HR perspective, I don't know if those titles to me line up from my knowledge of what that role would do. I also think the role of communication, I do think, I have spoken up about the need to have, strategic and tactical and different types of communication. My concern is that this conversation, while today it is very focused on policing, I think that the greater conversation is about what do we invest in our community, what is important to us, and how do we communicate that to our public? And so it's solely being for the police department brings me concern that we are not coordinating and connecting. We had this conversation as it related to marijuana, and having that social equity group come together, having different individuals of different departments, and to drive that. And so that's one of the concerns that I have. So needing more information there. And then just looking at that assistant director role, it seems like there was a number of items that this person would do. And that is also just one of my concerns as well. So I wanted to bring that up about the budget amendment. And lastly, you all have Commissioner Kelly to thank, but I have in my office from 2015 safe recommendations. Some of you are very familiar with this. I served as a community volunteer. I was working at Spectrum Health in the Hispanic Center back in 2015. We talk about labor market, employment in the community, disaggregating unemployment rates for African American population and Hispanic Latino population during the period of 2011 to 2013, which were 27.8 and 18% respectively. We talk about mental health in the community, the importance of mental first aid and 5-step action plans. We talk about police accountability, technology in the community. I bring this up because I think the sentiments and the comments that, thank you, Commissioner Kelly, that I've heard today, to me, do not represent overreaction. And I think we have all said that. But I think as I'm sitting here and as I spent time in my office over the weekend and looking at this and looking at a guide that we had in 2015 and knowing that we're going to go into 2021 and that we are still talking about things like mental health supports in our police department and our fire department, and just knowing that I feel that we haven't moved forward from a point of where I was serving as a community volunteer to now be an elected official. And so I appreciate the comments and the commentary about what this means, and there are absolute realities to this. I also think we have not lived up to some of these reforms that we have put forth. We have spent time and energy on that. We work not just solely with ourselves, but on this safe task force we also worked with the county, with public health officials, with hospitals and different departments, and here we are. And I think for me, going through that last budget cycle, it was an experience of going through it with COVID. And, for me now, I have to think about what are the things that I have said are values to me? What are the things that are most important in this community? Where are the challenges? So when we talk about workforce development and we talk about mental health, we talk about the fact that there is a lack of affordable housing. For me, I feel it is necessary to put a motion on the floor to move to 32%, to move to that minimum requirement in the charter, to make sure we have items that would include things like participatory budgeting that would bring forth individuals' voices. Because right now, what we are experiencing on both sides, people who want more police and who truly believe that more police keep them safe, and those who would never call the police for anything that would happen. Like, we are living in that city within a city. We are living in this book, in that what I believe is the next book in the next chapter, here in Grand Rapids right now. And so for me, I am putting that motion on the floor. I have thought long and hard about it. I don't like to make rash decisions either. This is my 7th month on the commission, but even more than ever, spending time reflecting and reading and researching all the things that we have committed to publicly. Some of us who were on the commission, some of us who weren't, but I think all of us have been doing work in neighborhoods, with our businesses, with our churches, even if it isn't in this elected body. And so that's why I feel strongly to make that motion today.
Mayor, I'll begin with responding to some of Commissioner Sasi's comments and maybe need the help of the chief.
Point of order.
And others.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. A motion has been put on the floor. Before the city manager responds to Commissioner Isasi's comment, I think we need to move forward with whether the motion has merit.
Okay. So is there support for Commissioner Isasi's motion?
Support.
All right, it's moved and supported. So the motion before us, Commissioner Isasi, do you want to repeat that?
Yes, I make a motion to move our fiscal year 2021 police budget to the 32% that is the charter minimum, with the intent. This is, I should have wrote it out, Commissioner Lanier. With the intention of having a plan in place so that we can have participatory budgeting, we can have individuals be part of that process. But I do feel that is necessary. Sorry, I guess let me stop there. That's a motion, and I will leave the other commentary for after. Thank you.
So there's a motion and support. So City Manager, do you want to, and then I'll open it up for other comments from my colleagues.
Sure, Mayor. And I didn't realize that was the actual motion when she was saying her preference to feel compelled to do so. So my apologies, but a couple of things going to the earlier comments on the various boards from public safety, CAB, and SAFE. And so I think this group that the police chief is trying to bring together does not change the roles of those boards. It gives him a group in addition to those. The roles of CAB has been on appeal of disciplinary hearings, and public safety is much broader, but that's only a monthly meeting. So the police chief gets an opportunity to have a group of community members who are not appointed to a public board to help with things that may need more than a 1 hour or 1 day a month meeting. And so this is an additional resource. This is part of community engagement. And so what we will do is to see how the interaction between that group and any others that we may have can be more appropriately and effectively utilized. And you'll hear the Oversight Office speak to that as well in future briefings. The second issue on the actual, someone needs to put their mic on mute. I think City Attorney, it might be yours. Thank you. The second issue on the budget amendments on the classifications, I think we will continue to look at the way that those jobs are deployed and recruited for, but the intent was to try to get a fiscal placeholder with the most appropriate classification and then assess how best to utilize those classifications in recruitment. And if they're sufficient, then that's fine. And if not, then they'll be need to go back and revisit for the most appropriate classification. But I believe the staff does feel that those classifications could be utilized in making those personnel changes. And so that was the thinking about that. But the rest is a matter of, just like even with any other classification, you would assess the job skills, the knowledge and abilities, and use that to build a profile for the recruitment. And as you are aware, the job profile is not always the exact same as every dimension in the job description. Then the other comment I heard was on the SAFE Task Force recommendations, and thank you for sharing that. I have had similar conversations, or I guess communications, with Commissioner Lanier. I think what our staff attempted to do was to take the commission budgeted studies that have been referenced in terms of the number that the chief alluded earlier, and try to give accountability for those. I think the more that we can be informed by the recommendations of various groups, the better. And amending the accountability reports to include some of the things that were discussed in SAFE, I think is very appropriate in the future. What I will say, though, these conversations, these issues are systemic issues, systemic change, and we should not be, at least I was just speak for myself, I don't grow weary in dealing with things that have taken hundreds of years to be systematized, and we're going to have to fight even harder to make sure that we are addressing them. And unfortunately, I was not here in 2015, and so the conversations that we've had since then may seem redundant to some in this community, but they still need to be had. And so my commitment is to try to do as much as we can to move us forward. The conversations around mental health, I think we recognize that in previous budgets, and that's the reason why the police department do have 2 new positions in their department to help with issues related to mental health. So the victim assistance position that the chief referenced earlier is somewhat responsive to making sure that we respond to issues around mental health in a different way, both externally as well as the internal wellness coordinator, dealing with both the trauma externally by community members and the trauma by the department. And so, not to say obviously that is not the end all answer, but we do recognize the need to be more proactive in the behavioral health services, but are fully committed to improving upon that. And I think I've already spoke to the budget amendments earlier in the staff's recommendations, so I'll let that speak for itself.
If I could speak, Mayor. Excuse me.
Sure.
So I have a few concerns. One is that this isn't on the agenda for Cal. It's on the agenda for the night meeting. And if you're talking about amending an ordinance, there's a process for that, and we're not following that right now. So my recommendation would be, I know you have the motion out there and support it, that you table this, you get it in the proper venue, which would be the night meeting, And then we talk about the proper process for an ordinance amendment.
Okay, thank you, City Attorney. Let's see. Should we have additional conversation? I guess I'll refer to City Attorney. Should we have some additional conversations about it before asking that it be on the agenda tonight?
Yep.
For some reason, there was interference. Can you repeat again, ma'am?
Well, I'm curious about process. We should have additional conversations about it now, or just move it to our evening meeting.
It should move to evening meeting because it's on the agenda for the night meeting, and that's what.
So you're saying under the current budget amendment that's already on the agenda tonight, that it can be discussed at that time?
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor, I would support that.
I'm sorry, what was that, Commissioner? You would support that?
I would support that.
Okay, all right. And is everyone else okay with that? Yes, okay.
Okay, sorry, now the clerk's got to weigh in. So to clean up the minutes, because we have a motion to support, if Commissioner Sasson is fine with that going to the meeting, if she can withdraw that motion and Commissioner Lanier withdraw our support, that way it would be, otherwise we just have this motion like hanging out there for the cow proceedings.
So that would be Commissioner Asasi and Commissioner Jones.
Sorry, Commissioner Jones, yes.
And then well, it's not really suspending the rules. Let me just clarify, because we already have a budget amendment on the table.
Right.
Well, I will withdraw my motion. Do I need to say the whole thing again, Joel?
No.
Okay. I'm withdrawing it so that it can be in the evening meeting.
Support.
Okay. Withdraw and support. Okay. Commissioners, any other questions for the city manager or for the chief or Mr. Davis on the presentation that was shared? Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I want to spend some time speaking about the presentation that was made by both City Manager Washington as well as Chief Payne and others who participated on this morning around the issue of police reform. I know that we will go into more in-depth conversations or discussion on this evening regarding any potential changes to existing charter language or the potential of reducing budgets. But I do want to speak on the fact that I want to continue to put out there for my colleagues and also for the community just the absolute, and again, I think this was really the presentations this morning, I think, really spoke to the need for us to continue to be open to reimagining policing in our community. We have to, I think, commit to doing things differently in hopes of getting different outcomes. And if it means to move resources within the budget in hopes of getting different outcomes, then that's what it'll take. I think that we need to commit to stop doing the same old and expecting something different. That's what I think when we talk about reimagining, that's what comes to mind. I think we need to do all that we can to put things in place to actually address community violence. I have heard very clearly from the countless individuals who have emailed us and called us and have made known to us what their desires are, both those who reside in Grand Rapids as well as those who don't. And it's interesting that one of the constant themes was, the actual issue of community violence. And there is, I think, a certain opinion that says that community violence should be met with greater policing. But it doesn't. But I saw very few people speak to really the need to drill down and tap into the root cause of community violence. And so, I would like to again see us put things in place to actually address community violence, like fund and implement Cure Violence, intentionally invest in neighborhoods and communities that experience higher rates of crime because of poverty, lack of opportunity, and proximity. Again, and I think we can speak specifically about neighborhoods of focus, which fall primarily in the third and first wards of our city, where we apparently see a higher rate of crime. And again, I want to attribute crime to proximity, to opportunity, because I think that's a fair assessment compared to just, unfortunately, the commonality or the common framing, which is to criminalize Black and brown people, which I think we as a society do way too often. And I don't think it's any different here in our beloved Grand Rapids. I want to also suggest that, colleagues, I have spent a lot of time ad nauseum researching and reading and studying police reform. And the one consistent theme is the absolute lack of accountability when it comes to police unions. My hypothesis is that it's union leadership who sets the tone and fosters the culture of the department. We have seen this throughout our entire country. I am utterly amazed at the ways in which they continuously get some of their members off the hook for bad behavior and even murder. Did you know that the other officers, I think there were 3 officers who were involved in the George Floyd murder, could actually get their job back through the arbitration process? There's something wrong about that scenario, but the Minneapolis Police Union has had great success convincing arbitrators to reinstate fired officers. That's just one recent example. We all talk, we've heard the language throughout the last month and even beyond that, about removing bad apples from the department, and that the vast majority of our officers are good folk. I'm not here at all on this morning to throw officers under the bus. However, I'm tired of talking about removing bad apples because I have no idea who the good apples are and who the bad apples are. No one in the public does. The chief probably knows, and I'm most certain union leadership knows. Again, I think there's something terribly wrong with that scenario. And so, colleagues, I want to make it known that one of the greatest fears as an elected official, and more importantly as a Black man, is the shooting or killing of an unarmed Black or brown body by law enforcement in our town. I'm sure many would utter the exact same words that were said by residents in Minneapolis, Louisville, Atlanta, Staten Island, North Charleston, Ferguson, Tulsa, and other cities. And those words were, that wouldn't happen here. I want to suggest otherwise. Union leadership always finds a way to provide the worst case scenario as it pertains to our community. It's always a picture of crime at its very worst, a portrait of mayhem and disorder. And the story concludes that law enforcement is what the community needs, especially the poorer, more ethnically diverse communities. It's never a suggestion of focusing or investing on a community violence reduction strategy, or how about actually investing in these very communities that have long been ignored. And again, as I said earlier, that's in large part parts of southeast and southwest quadrant of our beloved city, the areas known as neighborhoods of focus. I've often said, and I continue to stand by the premise, that crime is a component of poverty, opportunity, and proximity. And I also believe that if the only tool in one's toolbox is a hammer, then everything becomes a nail. And that is where we are with law enforcement, both locally and nationally. And therein lies the danger of continuing down the path of doing the same old when it comes to policing. We need to fundamentally reimagine policing, and in the process, pay closer attention to the police union and what I see as a major component to the issues we are facing here in GR and around the country. What do you call it when you pull guns on young, innocent Black bodies that are unfortunately perceived as threatening, but refuse to apologize to said victims? Refuse to see them as human and as having value. I tell you what you call it arrogance. I've yet to see any relationship grow or prosper when one party refuses to admit to any wrongdoing, but that is the type of culture that we're dealing with. This is what you call narcissism. A person who never admits they're wrong. That's what a narcissist is. There was a recent community rally that occurred in downtown GR where a retired officer said these words, and I quote, "We do have to hold these city leaders accountable. We have to. I don't wish any of them, especially our chief and our sheriff, to ever have to kneel again unless it is in prayer for our officers," the retired officer said to resounding applause. He was spot on with part of his comments in that city leaders have to be held accountable. But guess what? So does all facets of law enforcement. The chief is held accountable. We as elected officials are held accountable. All the appointed city officials are held accountable. But what about the union? Why aren't they held accountable? This is the same group that at the drop of a dime can and has released a vote of no confidence concerning the chief of police. This last occurred during the tenure of Chief Rahinsky. And there seems to be a pattern whenever a chief shows empathy or compassion for their neighbor. And to hear a former officer criticize the acts of our chief when he decided to join his fellow neighbors by taking a knee is both disappointing and disheartening, colleagues. What the chief did was recognize the value of his fellow neighbor when he decided to take a knee. It was not a sign of weakness, nor was it a sign of taking sides. It's called empathy. It's an example of what it means to practice belonging. It's not othering. That quote by the retired officer is arrogance. Arrogance means having or revealing an exaggerated sense of one's own importance or abilities. Again, I'm not going to apologize for wanting to reimagine policing in our community. I want to suggest that a hammer is not the tool that is needed to deal with the issues at hand. We need to use as many tools as we can get our hands on to address the myriad issues before us. And I know that each and every one of you are in many ways overwhelmed to some extent by what we are receiving in terms of communication from community. And if it's one thing that has been made perfectly clear with the uprise of community, I'm led back to the words of Dr. King, who said that a riot is the language of the unheard. And I beg the question of all that is being talked about, of all that our police force is suggesting, of all that folks who are writing in are suggesting, has anyone talked to the communities that are being most impacted? Have you had substantive conversations with a Black or a Latinx neighbor in our community? Have you asked them about their relationship or their opinion of the police? And I want to suggest that there may be a different narrative that comes from them compared to what we have heard throughout the course of this last month or so. And so, colleagues, again, there's no doubt that what we have before us is a significant responsibility. But I just think it's time out for doing the same old. And I think we've all heard from all kind of folks from the grass tops to the grassroots. And if anything, we need to, I think, really consider the voices of those who have been unheard when we're making our decisions. Because if we continue down the path of going down this same trail of having a set commitment from those who, in my opinion, have the most influence over the officers, which is union leadership, then I don't expect anything to change. And I want change. I want to have it one day, very soon, where we don't even need. There's a limited need for law enforcement because there is more opportunity within our community, all facets of our community, to where the crime is reduced simply because there is more opportunity. There's greater hope. There is less crime. And so I am, like all of you, again, just really, really disturbed, disheartened perhaps. But yet I know that I have confidence in our city manager. I have confidence in our chief. But we're talking about a significantly heavy lift. And I just want us all to recommit to this idea of making this heavy lift. And if you would hopefully join myself and others in reimagining policing in our beloved city.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right, others who Want to weigh in on this before we move to our next item? We do have two more, actually 4 more items before us before we're able to move on to executive session. So others who wish to weigh in, Commissioner Lanier?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager and team, for your presentation. I'm going to do my best at not trying to repeat all of what's been shared that I'm in support of. But I think my colleagues have shared some really bold statements and have asked some really challenging questions. And I think as I'm hearing the questions that have surfaced and hearing what's on the hearts and minds of those of you who have already spoken, as well as looking at the presentation, I think what I feel is necessary is a detailed mapping of what it is we're trying to accomplish. So 3 weeks ago, I made that request asking for an A3 to be presented so that we can fully see what it is that we're trying to do and the methods that we're using to go about the change that we're trying to create. Because I think that we have been talking about this for quite some time, and even during the budget discussions, obviously before we were being petitioned through communications from a lot of people asking for defunding, as well as most recently those who are asking us not to defund. And so for me, in how I process and how I make decisions, it's important for me to kind of see a full picture. And I think that the absence of a strategic plan from the police department, the absence of a strategic plan from OPA, it's hard for me to understand, to Mr. Davis's comment earlier about haphazard changes. It's hard for me to understand some of the recommendations that are coming before us, because they do feel a little haphazard, because I don't know how they fit into the overall plan that we have not been privy of. And so, and I think it's tied to some of the frustrations and the concerns that we're hearing from the community, because I think they too are frustrated with having spent so much time. Most of that time has come before many of you who are sitting at this table now, and we're sitting in the seats that you're in, including some of our appointed officials. But we've been doing a lot of work in trying to address some of these issues. And we did have a reporting out of progress maybe 2.5 years ago that started with SAFE and got us to whichever plan that was out at that point. It may have just been 12-point and SAFE at that time. But I think this is why there's frustration, and where the community is being asked to have patience today. They're asked to have patience today after having given this institution a lot of themselves to weigh into some of the change that we would like to see. And so for those things to be shelved or not to be a part of some of the recommendations, I think is hard for people to swallow, because they feel like, well, what about the work we've already done? And I think that's why, and I feel the exact same way. When we have, and I think the mayor and Commissioner Isasi both mentioned SAFE specifically, and for obvious reasons, I'm committed to making sure that the recommendations that are within would be a part of a more comprehensive plan. And there have been a lot of those recommendations implemented, and it would be great for the community to hear those things as well. So what I will try to do, I was looking at page 18 in the presentation, where a lot of the recommendations that had been suggested over the course of some of our meetings, those recommendations are outlined. And and I think this is a really good structured page. Those city managers, as you were saying, maybe challenging to read on the screen. I printed it, and as I was reading it, I like how it is separated out in those categories. But I do think that there are a lot of recommendations over the course of the many conversations that we've had that are missing from this list. Last week, I sent an email, city manager, to you and the chief, asking, reminding you of the suggestions that, or the questions that I had gotten from the community, and that I had mentioned 3 weeks ago when we last met. And I also added a few more things that have come up between that meeting and today's meeting, with the hope of trying to get those items on this list so that the public can see where we are in that process. So the items that I have not heard about, I'm going to just quickly go through them because there are 19 items. I'm going to quickly go through them just to say these items need to be on the list. And I don't know how to get the items on the list. I think in our communications earlier this morning, city manager, you were saying that the items were items that came from, or some of them at least, came from communications that came from community groups. I think that the commission's input should also be considered as you're developing a list and certainly delivering responses. And so I want to make sure that I can see where this all fits. So obviously, I think reporting back on SAFE was missing, and I think that that's important, as was mentioned by two other colleagues today. The chief strategic plan, I think as quickly as the city itself got through its strategic planning work, if the chief of police had already begun working on a strategic plan, I think that's an urgent thing to complete in order for us to hear, like, what's the full scope of what's going to happen, which includes the budget from the police department, so we can know exactly how we're moving forward. I think OPA's strategic plan is another one. I don't know where they are in their creation of their strategic plan. I know where the chief said he was, but I hadn't heard that. So maybe theirs isn't as close to being done as the police department's is. Again, wanting the A3 because it tells an at-a-glance story so that we can fully see what the recommendations are, what the costs are associated with those recommendations, and how and when they'll be implemented. I think the presentations are really great to have. We didn't get the last one from 3 weeks ago. We've gotten this one this morning. So it makes it easy to track, but absent of something that allows you to file and track, like Commissioner Kelly did for Commissioner Isasi with the Safe Task Force book in her office, I think it's challenging to keep up with what's being stated in these meetings. I think that Ms. Stout did mention a little bit about the equity lens and that there's going to be work. I think in my recommendation, I was asking what was the process that we followed in order to make sure that an equity lens is being utilized for the recommendations that we're recommending. I did see a couple of those already on there. The piece about a more diverse recruit process it's great to see Lieutenant O'Brien leading the charge with that. I think the results that she's gotten with the recruiting of female officers through some of her targeted efforts speaks to what we potentially could yield with our persons of color as we're trying to recruit from that angle. I would also like to recommend that we include high-ranking members of the police department who are persons of color to be a part of the work that's being done, because I think she was effective in her work recruiting women to the police department because she's a woman who's in the police department. I mentioned in a recommendation that funding Seeking Safety, which is a program that we have a grant through the federal government, and it is at the end of its grant cycle. And as we've been talking about mental health and some of those other elements, this program helps victims of violence for our targeted age group from 14 to 24 is the age group for the program. And it is making a difference in our community. And there's data to support that. There have been evaluations done on that program. It's only a 250,000 annual program, but it has impacted hundreds of males who have gone through that program because it's targeting males. I think we have not had the conversation about legislatively what items should we be lobbying or adding to our legislative platform that are tied to police reform and things of that nature. Those are the types of conversations I think that we need to have. And to Commissioner Jones's point, what happens when there are inappropriate behaviors or law enforcement that participated in inappropriate behaviors? What is the outcome of that? What are the protections that are in place, and how do we negotiate otherwise? The Promise Zone scholarship dollars, I think I've talked about and made recommendations about us having conversations with the committee who works on the Promise Zone scholarship dollars to see how do we target dollars, and I don't know how it goes because I'm not a member of that board, but how do we incentivize people, young people, to get involved or become interested in some of our hard to fill positions in the public sector? It's policing and teaching and some of the others. So how do we use a mechanism that's tied to paying for college? It sounds like, based on the presentation, that that law enforcement is doing a lot of internal complaints. But I am curious about why do we think we're seeing a reduction in IA complaints from citizens? I know we have talked about in the past and with other recommendations that we need to promote those efforts so that people will feel comfortable and confident. And as the results are coming in, that people feel like they were heard through their complaint and that something was done about it. I'm still curious, and I think a plan, the strategic plan, will tell the story about the budget amendment with the positions that are in the budget amendment for today, as well as the chief of staff position for the GRPD. I don't feel like I can, as people are asking me, I don't feel like I'm able to tell the story about everything it is that we're trying to accomplish. And that's what I need in order to say, this is why this is important to have or to add, because if people are asking us to reduce the budget, I'm not sure how adding positions to the police department will provide. It seems like that's going to be counterintuitive for us or counterproductive for us to get the results that people are seeking. And the last couple, it's tied to positions. I know when I was talking to community groups who have made recommendations about increasing staffing and OPA, they've talked about data analysis. So I'm curious, I haven't heard much about that or any response to that. And what does that mean for OPA? If my understanding of OPA, and I know that once the strategic plan is done, we'll have a better understanding. But if my understanding of OPA isn't just about accountability for the police department, but accountability for city government. And if it's a place where if people feel like they've gone through a process and with any department and things went awry, they would have a place to go to be able to share those concerns so that there would be some investigative work to find out what may have transpired and hear the outcomes of that. And so I'm very supportive of staffing the department based on that understanding, but it certainly would be great to have a full picture of what that work entails and how people in the public will be able to utilize it so that I can know exactly what it is that I'm supporting. And then the data that was being asked or suggested on your slideshow. I'm trying to get to that screen. It was on slide 32, I think is a really good idea for the matrix. I'm wondering if it's possible to include this type of data, positive interactions with the community. I know that that's something that the PD has said that they are working on, is to make sure that officers are having positive interactions daily when they're scheduled. So So that will be one. Another one is open cases that are under investigation. And then overtime that's being worked. And just to kind of summarize how overtime is being spent. And I think my last point is on page 35, there are questions about or statements about the interns, and Chief Payne mentioned that interns, eliminating the interns impacts the Grow Your Own pipeline. And I'm curious to know how many interns from the past have been hired in the department. And lastly, on page 36, it has the Chief Advisory Board. And I'm curious to know, I know that Chief Payne also mentioned that there are others who will be added to this board, like Commissioner Isasi. I am curious to know, how do all of these boards, and I recognize that you're doing it because you wanted to perform a different task, but it certainly would be great, again, as we're trying to tell the story, to know how they will interact and what, like put them all together and say, they're doing this, and they're doing that. So it would be great to hear that as a part of the strategic plan. And it would also be great to know how many people will be on that board when it's at capacity, and how are we determining who's on that body. It sounds like from previous presentations that the chief is making those decisions, which I think is obviously great because they're his advisory board. But just curious to know, if someone were to ask me, I'm interested in becoming a member, how do I go about doing it? I have no idea.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. I know some of those questions, probably the chief and the city manager don't have the answers at this very moment, but I'll let either of them respond to any of the items that they are able to, and then maybe they can get back with you on the other issues. And I agree, the strategic plans for both departments, I think, are critical, and I think would help really create a picture for what does the future mean for both of those.
Yeah, I'll start and then ask the chief. Well, we'll do it. I'll start, then ask their oversight office to talk about the briefings that we've had for the city commission around the building of that office and the strategy that was shared out of the birth of our corporate strategic plan with the city commission that Mr. Davis has been working from. So these are conversations that we've had with commission previously that has been in sync with the goal for oversight. And so perhaps Mr. Davis can elaborate a little bit further. And then the police chief. I'll just simply say, in acknowledgement of Commissioner Lanier's questions, we did receive those. I was out of the office last week. And on last Wednesday, I did ask the police chief and staff to look at those. And many of the things that you've asked, Commissioner, have been considered as part of this briefing and are in flight in terms of strategy. I just want to reiterate to the commission, this is not something that we do in one commission meeting. It's going to be an evolving process. And we do need the time and space to be able to effectively strategize and implement. And so what we've been doing is very quickly being responsive to the urgency of the moment with the information that we know at the time. Our other path could have been absolutely to, which I think is very responsible, to say nothing and say, look, give us another 3 months and we'll come back to you with every question we could have anticipated. But we were trying to be very, very responsive to what we knew were the issues and prioritize those major concerns. I do think that many of the suggestions that you made are things that I asked the police chief to actually follow up with you in my absence on those questions. And so my understanding was that communication has taken place. So I don't know the extent of that conversation, but we'll be happy to have additional follow-up for you and other members of the public. And for instance, on the Promise Zone, since you mentioned that, Commissioner, we've had extensive conversations with Dr. Pink, GRCC, and other members of the board about collaborating and developing a intentional academy with GRCC that allows students to progress from the high schools into the academy and the police chief to hire. We've had conversations with GRCC and the director. We're just not at the point, and that it was on the presentation of one of the strategies. And so I will pause and ask the police chief, ask Mr. Davis to come and share additional information about his office and then the police chief. But I think what the staff is going to need, we can't have it both ways. We want you to do something now, and then what we do now is say, we want you to do something very, very comprehensive. We want to do both, but the realization is we can't do both at the same time. So what we have brought forth are what we thought were the priority changes that were needed because of capacity that's needed both in the oversight office as well as consistent with the chief's plan, the communication. Some of those things have been talked about long before today regarding improving communication. But even some of you, I've heard from some of you around your concerns on improving the communications with the police department and the community. And so those are consistent with previous conversations. But Mr. Davis, if you could share your thoughts on your strategic plan, and then I'll let the chief do the same.
Sure. So OPA has been engaged in the strategic planning process for several months now. It began, I want to say, back in about December is when we had our first meeting, and we did give a update to commission about our strategic planning process. It started with some research and analysis. After that research and analysis, we then had some community engagement where we brought in a group of individuals from community to really talk about what oversight should look like for Grand Rapids, recognizing that what works for other cities is not exactly what will work for Grand Rapids. Then we went to our broader community engagement strategy, which includes going to community groups and going out to take what we came up with internally and say, is this right? Are we getting it right? And during that process, we were also going to go into the departments, both police and fire, and had begun to work with their deputy chiefs to set that up. And then COVID happened. So because COVID happened at that time, it slowed down our strategic planning process. And that's why earlier in this update, we talked about the fact that we were going to be launching a digital engagement strategy, and that should be launched by the next commission meeting, which is July 21st. And we had to reimagine the way we were doing it. So for us, a big part of it was making sure we were engaged in community, so the community had that tangible space with us. But obviously the world is different now, so we've pivoted to do that in a different way. From a content perspective, OPA is designed around 4 main pillars, and that's change, accountability, restorative justice, empowerment, and engagement. So Commissioner Lanier, when you talked about that accountability part, you're correct in saying that that's not all OPA will be doing. That's DA, as I often say, right? So that's one part of what we're doing. But those studies, that's statistical analysis, restorative justice, which is unique to Grand Rapids, and that engagement part are also factors.
And Chief, if you could as well, I just want to remind the commission that earlier when we commenced the briefing, we did talk about having those updates on strategy, as Mr. Davis on the 11th, and the chief committed to do the same as well. Chief?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Lanier. We started our strategic plan back in November, and the holidays came up, and then, as Mr. Davis mentioned, COVID came up. That delayed it. So we started back again on finalizing it, and we will have our strategies. We're building it around the 6 pillars of 21st century policing. And that's how we're building it around that, and some of the initiatives that were mentioned in that And again, on August 11th, we will be able to report out to commission those 6 pillars. City manager mentioned while we're sitting here, I received an email from Mr. Reese from the director of community college email or police academy on getting back together because we have been having discussions and setting up another meeting about the promise, the partnership and the police academy. So yes, that's where we're at with the strategic plan at this point. And I just was informed we've hired 14 interns since 2016 from our intern program as police officers.
Thank you, Chief. And Commissioner, I'll add just so everyone is aware, we're still actively serving on the Promise Zone Authority. I just want to let you know, I also serve on the fundraising subcommittee, and we're still actively raising money to secure the Promise Zone for the fall. But we have had conversations, as the city manager said, with Dr. Pink about what could that look like in the future. So just know that that's a priority. Promise Zone's working on a number of issues, but top priority right now is to secure the funds so that we can move forward this fall with all of the eligible students.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Mr. Davis and City Manager.
Thanks. Commissioners, any other questions or comments before we move on? Commissioner Repart? Again, Commissioner Moody, did I see your hand up? I'll go to Commissioner Repart and then Commissioner Moody.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief because I know we got other things to accomplish, but I do want to thank Mark and the chief for bringing forth some really wonderful progress today. I know that looking back at the budget and making $400,000 worth of cuts is not easy. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate the timelines that we have in front of us so we know when stuff is coming back to us. I think I just want to say, this call to defund the police is, like the city manager said, it's multifaceted and there's different groups within it. And it's jarring to think about that, which is the whole point of it. It's a language to get us to think. And what I think has emerged from it that is fascinating is a new vision, like Commissioner Jones is talking about, reimagining policing. How are we going to respond to homelessness, mental illness, addiction? And most importantly, how are we going to uplift the Black community in a way that we haven't done as a city? And so I think that while it's easy to, kind of maybe dismiss the call to defund, it really, I think, has allowed for some new thinking to emerge that that I think is really interesting. And, one example is our, this HOT team. We got a great report from Chief Lambert about the HOT team, about some initial success of it. And then right in the presentation, it says we need to determine a future funding stream. And we want to add 2 social workers and 2 mental health specialists to the team. And so that's the conversation. And, in my mind, I just want to reiterate, I believe I have a target in my mind. I'm glad to see that OPA is at 1.3%. If the gold standard is 3, I would like that to be our standard. And 32% for the police department budget. The chief presented some of the impacts of what that might be, but I believe from what I've looked at, and this is my 3rd budget, those don't have to be the changes that get us to that number. So I would be interested in looking at all the paths that are reasonable, that are thoughtful, with the right timelines, that could lead to these improved outcomes that we want, as well as keep the community safe at the same time. And maybe I'm just an optimistic person, but I believe that we can do that. I believe that we can find that path, and I believe that we can find it together. So just want to reiterate those things. But I do want to thank the city manager and the chief for presenting some real tangible progress to us today from the last time that we met.
Commissioner Moody?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank the city manager as well and Chief Payne for the work that their staff has put in to making sure that we get a good, clear understanding where it is that we need to go with policing. In the events of the past, especially with policing surrounding the African American community, I believe that with COVID-19 at this point in time in our era, it has uncovered and opened up a whole new door for us to walk in. It has given us an opportunity for us to realize that policing reform can be changed and can be done. I echo some of the things that Commissioner Jones has said, especially in reference to the union. I think it's important that we do not make too much of a hasty move. We look at the majority of those who have sent us emails and who have called us on the phone, that we take into consideration what they have said, but at the same time, that we ought to take into consideration what our city manager and our police chief have brought to us today. I think they need an opportunity to do what is necessary and have the time to do it. I don't want to move hastily with making a decision right away to say defunding is the way to go, or even the 32%. I think we should give them the opportunity, in my opinion, and in my thoughts, to work this thing through because it's going to take time. I'm in favor of reform. I'm not in favor of defunding. I'm in favor of reform, and I echo Commissioner Jones that reform also may be including reforming the union as well. So with that, I want to just say again, I don't want us to move too fast and too hastily. I think this is a process that needs to take its time. I think we got up until August the 11th for the chief to come back with a different plan as to how this is going to take place. And I'm prepared to make a decision around that time.
Thanks, Commissioner. Okay, any other questions or comments, Commissioner O'Connor?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief as well. I just, I'm all right, and I think it's appropriate that we have continued conversations about, the change in how we do business in Grand Rapids, be that police reforms, but even a greater conversation around criminal justice in Grand Rapids. We talk about we have a court system, we have a mental health system, we have a variety of things that have such interplay, and while the police department is a significant portion of this conversation, I think it's important, and I appreciate the fact that there's a desire to want to have a plan before making a budgetary decision. The budgetary decision is not the outcome. The outcome is to improve outcomes for people in Grand Rapids, be them Black people, brown people, Latinx people. We want better outcomes for everyone. And so rather than make the budgetary decision about whatever that arbitrary percentage is, and I have a variety of issues with the 32 versus 39 and the way accounting things have been done over the course of the last 40 years since that, or 30 years since that charter amendment was made. Those are arbitrary decisions. What I want to talk about is how we get to better outcomes that work for people. And I'm happy to be a big contributing factor and a part of that. And I know all of you are, I know the staff is. And I want to figure out how we have a vision to get to good outcomes before we just make an arbitrary budget decision. And so with that, I'll yield my time.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner. Okay, Commissioners, I think I'll move us on then from this budget presentation. I know we'll have additional conversations tonight at our evening meeting. And I'll take us to our next item on the agenda, and that is Equitable Grand River Restoration Initiative. And this is about our MLBE registration program. So a lot of good work's happening in this space as well. City Manager?
Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to our staff to present Ms. Dowd.
Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sierra Atkins with the Office of Equity and Engagement. I need to share my screen and share the PowerPoint with you all. Could I have permission to do so, please? While that's happening, in the meantime, I'll discuss why we're coming to you all today. It's been an interdepartmental effort with the
You're all
Office
set now, Sierra.
Oh, thank you. Great. It's been an interdepartmental effort with the Office of Equity and Engagement, as well as environmental services, engineering, and planning. And we came together as the River Equity Work Group. And throughout our sessions meeting together, we discovered that in order for us to meet the outcomes that we hope to achieve for this, the overall river restoration project, we definitely need to increase our micro-local business enterprise list. So this is where this initiative comes from for you all today. I'm going to present along with my colleague, Alvin Hills, business developer, also with the Office of Equity and Engagement. I would like to scene set for us. Within our office, we have a river equity statement that we utilize as we come up with any river-related initiatives. So I want to share that with you all today so that you can know this was the backdrop in addition to the river equity work group that we utilize to figure out what type of program do we need and how we want to structure it. So that is to create a river for all that honors both the history and the future of our river by embedding racial and economic equity principles in all that we do, both in the water and along the river banks. We understand that all river-related decisions today will have an immense generational impact on the residents of our city. So with that understanding, we try to be very intentional with our strategies that we present to you all today. So two of our partners with the MOVE program are Grand Rapids Area Black Businesses and Michigan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We also have the capacity to add up to 2 additional MOVE program partners who are going to work with us to help businesses get signed up on the MLBE list. And with that, I turn it over to my colleague, Alvin Hills.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. In efforts to keep it local, this work is intentional about expanding our existing MLBE directory as well as the utilization of our MLBEs in this program. Our engagement prior to bidding is super important to best position MLBEs to earn river contracts. And what we know is when our MLBEs are successful, their business grows and jobs are created for residents. Next slide, please, Ms. Atkins. So why implement an MLBE registration program? In our strategic plan of that has recently been adopted, this has been a strategy to monitor the current dollar spent with MLBEs, and with the generational projects such as the river, we want to be intentional about tracking our MLBE participation. Through conversations with the construction industry, we have identified some of the following subcontract opportunities that aren't as robustly represented on our MLBE listing. So we'll be targeting some of those specific subcontract opportunities throughout this. Need for capacity building amongst our partners in the community. We want to make sure that community partners are well aware and educated and informed on our type of programs at the city so they could best refer and support us in meeting our goals. In efforts to prepare MLBEs for fall, winter 2021 bidding, we want to start this initiative now, connect them to the necessary departments to make sure that everything is a seamless process after they are certified as a micro-local. And then we do know that these companies who are local will create jobs and also wealth creation. Next slide, Ms. Atkins. About the program will run effectively today through October 31st. Our target goal is to add 30 to 40 new companies to our listing that can not solely support the river, but are really there to help us meet our goals on the river. And I didn't want to say solely because some of these companies still will be eligible for opportunities in our engineering engineering budget that we infrastructure. Who should apply? Kent County-based small minority and women-owned firms, and then they will apply through our designated partner agencies listed. Ms. Atkins.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hills. So our 3-part strategy is as follows. 1, we want to increase our community partnerships. we want to decrease systemic barriers, and we want to overall increase the MLBE registrations. So I'll briefly describe how we're going to do each of those things. So increasing our partnerships, Mr. Hills mentioned it. We want to be very intentional about capacity building. We know that in light of COVID, a lot of businesses have been hit very hard. And we know that the operators and MLBEs that we're trying to target have also been hit pretty hard. So we want to make sure that we provide compensation for our partners who are going to help us do this work, because we know we cannot do it alone. So it's intentional that we offer strategic consulting dollars to all of our participating partners, because we know that this endeavor is a big endeavor and it's going to require their time and leveraging of their social capital, because we're leaning on them to have relationships with the targeted MLBE groups that we're trying to reach. Decreasing systemic barriers. So throughout the work that Mr. Hills and I have been doing, we recognize that as a part of our MLBE certification program, the network statement can be a systemic barrier. It is a costly requirement for many small companies, and it can be time intensive in order to generate. A lot of companies may not have an accounting department or a CPA who can just readily send them this information at the touch of an email, which is why the city will contract with Hawkins and Company CPA, who's currently going through the process to be an MLBE, and they're currently an MBE, correct, Mr. Hills?
Yes.
And they are going to, they will help gather documentation and help these MLBEs get that network statement certification. And the city is going to supplement up to $500 of the cost for the network statement. So not only is Hawkins and Company going to give us a good rate for the work that we're trying to do, but we're also going to help supplement the cost for the businesses. In light of COVID, we know cash can be difficult to come by right now. The second barrier that we've identified is the lack of document translation. So the city is going to translate the MLBE registration application and all supporting materials for this endeavor in Spanish. So we currently have our packet out to the Hispanic Center and we're waiting on the translated materials to come back, because we know that that's also a language barrier for some people. We know that it's not representative of every single language that's spoken in Grand Rapids, albeit Kent County, but we know that this is a step in the right direction for that language inclusion. And increase MLBE registrations. So in addition to the work that our partner agencies are going to commence, we as the city are going to host virtual informational sessions, specifically letting MLBEs know how can your work impact the River for All development. So at any of these meetings, all MLBEs are invited to join. But we're going to have topics with hopefully specific Q&A and specific contract opportunities that are river related for each session. So on Thursday, July 9th, we're going to have some landscaper focused Q&A and contracting opportunities, but all of the informational sessions are general. We just want to know that if certain sectors might want to tune in to get specific Q&A questions answered throughout this. So we're going to host these virtual sessions once a week until August 6th, and really depend on our partner agencies to help us with this work. So I'll turn it back over to Mr. Hills.
Thanks, Ms. Atkins. So how will this initiative be funded? Total budget is up to $75,000. You'll learn more about the up to. $67,500 will be coming out of our Kellogg Foundation grant that Ms. Atkins manages. That will pay for our strategic consultant, the MLB registration, eligible leads, and then also subsidizing half of the net worth statement. The other $7,500 or up to $7,500 will come out of our general operating fund to help subsidize half of that net worth statement as well. And we say up to $75,000, and you'll learn more in the next slide. With community partners, this is kind of the allocation or breakdown of funding. Strategic consultant, as well as the accountant, and then the MLBE registrations or incentives is the larger portion of that funding. Next slide.
Can I just add, Mr. Hills, that the strategic consulting dollars are dollars that each agency gets upon signing up to be a partner agency with us for assistance with the consulting work that they're going to do. The 10,000, they can get an additional $10,000, which will make each contract up to 15,000, depending on how many MLBEs they register.
Correct. And this was the kind of the breakdown of how that was determined. So the 5,000 flat rate per organization to partner, referral and leads, extra $50 per qualified lead, completed MLB applications, 300 per eligible registration. Registration bonus for specific construction related fields as listed previously, concrete, trucking will incentivize another $50, which makes up the additional $10,000 that each of the partner agency can earn. Next slide. How do I know if I'm an MLBE? First thing is business age. So as long as you're in operation for at least 2 years is the initial qualifier. Location, your headquarters must be Kent County based. Registration in our CGI vendor system to make sure that in any instance that you do work for us, you get paid in a timely fashion. We evaluate business size based upon your NAICS code deemed by the Small Business Administration, and that monitors employee or revenue 3-year average, and it must be 25% or lower than that standard. So if a concrete company's standard is 10 million by the SBA, we look at the average 3-year revenue to be 2.5 million or less. And that final piece of qualification is the net worth statement, which reviews the majority owner's net worth to ensure that it is not more than the $250,000 threshold. Next slide. Special thanks to our partners in the river restoration as listed. This project has been a huge lift for the community and even up to the federal government. So we definitely wanted to acknowledge our partners on the river restoration and thank them for everything that they've contributed thus far and will. And I believe that will conclude our presentation at this moment.
Yes, do you guys have any questions for us?
Thank you. I'm going to see if I can get this PowerPoint taken down so that I can see everyone. Let's see who can take that down for me. Joel, can you take that down? All right, there we go. Thank you. So I see Commissioner Jones has a question, so I'll start with him. And first, I'll just say my thanks. I know I've been actively involved in the river restoration planning and process and have followed along with the great work that you're doing. And just want to say thanks for bringing this forward today, but also all the work you've done over the last several months to get us to where we are. So thank you. Commissioner Jones?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Ms. Atkins and Mr. Hills for your work thus far. I think this is a great work that has been done. I think the intentionality behind it is critically important, in that with the amount of investment that's going to be made in the restoration of the rapids, it's critically important that we have historically marginalized communities and entrepreneurs in those communities have an opportunity to participate in this investment. Two things I want to ask. One is, have we given thought to the consideration of MLBEs who are located outside of Kent County? And I would go so far as to say maybe those who are whose location or whose headquarters is in Ottawa County. It's a neighboring county, but it also could very well open up more opportunities for MLBEs who are headquartered in Ottawa County. How much are we wedded to just Kent County only?
To that point, we have considered Kent County has been a geographical boundary. I would say just simply from the when the program was established. So I think the Ottawa County piece will require just a little more thought, but I don't think that there's a reason that we couldn't expand those boundaries, but definitely want to understand as we do expand those boundaries, how that could potentially maybe impact some of our current companies. So I would say we'll just have to do some thoughtful consideration, but definitely something to consider.
Okay, very good. The other question that I had is, and perhaps I'm putting the cart before the horse, but the potential consideration for even greater incentive for majority-owned contractors to contract with MLBEs in this work. I know we were fortunate to recently pass the new legislation, which speaks to, I think, 9% as a incentive. And just wondering if there's room for an even greater number. I would I would very much be in support of something as high as 25%. Again, whatever it would take to get greater participation from greater participation opportunities for MLBEs in this work, simply because of the investment is so significant. There's millions of dollars that will be spent to restore the rapids. And what's critically important is that, again, more people have a chance to have a bite at the apple.
Oh, completely agree. And I'll say that increase to 25% in construction will be really have to be thoughtful on the commission's behalf as well as the manager's behalf for budget considerations. So right now our current cap is 5% with the $100,000 cap, but with extending that cap to 25%, I think we have to just study what that will cost us as an organization and see if that's a commitment that we as an organization is willing to. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thanks. But Commissioner, you raise a very good point. And the nice thing about this work, and I'm sure Ms. Atkins and Mr. Hills could speak to this, is that this has been work that we've done in partnership with our federal and state partners. And there's a alignment and commitment among all of our partners to do everything we can to keep these dollars local and to support MLBEs. And so I think that has been one of the many positive things that have come out of this. As the project moves forward, portions of it, like even potentially the hydraulic structure that will actually be built by the Army Corps of Engineers, but they have been at the table and they know our strong commitment to supporting local companies. Commissioner Lanier?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Hills and Ms. Atkins for your presentation. There was a slide, and I'm forgetting which number, but it talked about the maximum amount that a business could earn is, I think, $250,000 in order to qualify. Where does that threshold come from? Is that a federal threshold that's tied with the partnership we have with the federal government? Or did we, as a city, institute that number? And if it's ours, I'm just curious to know what went into that, coming up with that figure.
So the $250,000 is the net worth requirement that was determined in the creation of the MLBE program. So as far as where that number came from, I can't really speak to that at this moment, but I can get that information. I do know that it's targeted to the creation of the program as far as target ownership groups, and those who typically may have a higher net worth may not be classified as a micro local business from an enterprise standpoint. So that's the extent that I could speak to where that $250,000 threshold is tied to what will be deemed a micro business at the federal level.
Thank you. I'm curious because the MLBE program is, I don't know how many years old, but I know over a decade. So, there may be room then to change that number to adjust for inflation, which would then allow for other businesses to be a part of the program. Thanks. Thanks for the work on this. I need to make sure I reach out to Commissioner Allen, who was a champion of growing and expanding this program. And I'm sure he'll be pleased to see this work. Thank you so much.
And Commissioner Lanier, we do have that inflation being considered in our recent amendment of the MLBE policy to be more up to date. So absolutely.
All right, thank you. Any other final questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I will move us along then. So next, I have a resolution adopting a city commission policy to advance social equity within Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Okay, I have moved. Do I have support?
Support.
Moved and supported. Looks like Mr. DeLong, you're going to start us off on this?
I will start us out. Yes, thank you, Mayor. And then I'll be joined by Ms. Sierra Atkins, our equity analyst, who's been leading the team who worked on this policy. So we introduced the policy on the 16th of June and had a pretty good review of it then. And what this policy represents is the work of the Cannabis Justice Work Group, and is part of a three-pronged or four-pronged approach to having social equity be a key part of what we're doing in the cannabis business. So the second part would be licensing. The third part are the zoning ordinance amendments. Those two things will be considered at the evening's meeting and are part of the overall package to move this forward in the way that the City Commission talked about at their meeting on the 16th. So the social equity policy is a framework to ensure that our actions in this business represent our strategic plan goals for equity, and also increasing the business, this new business, to provide support for our community. It's focused on those who have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs in one part, and also on applicants that could advance equity on another part. So it's two-pronged. And also what we've done is made sure that the process here becomes, while it's voluntary initially, will become legally enforceable as we move forward into licensing and zoning and also renewals. So what I'd like to do is have Ms. Atkins talk about the subtle changes in the policy that have occurred since our review on the 16th. And these were work that was done based on the review of the work group to make sure we have the very best policy. So with that, Ms. Atkins, if you could run through those, please, then we'll have a discussion.
Sure. So within the first section, changes that we made from the June 16th language is that we added language to define the actual authority for the document. So you'll see in section 1, we have 4 bullet points that outline that will now be a city commission policy, as well as how this policy connects to other zoning and licensing procedures. In the second section for definitions, we
Point of order, excuse me, Ms. Atkins. Mayor, or can we have the city clerk pull up the document? I don't have a big enough screen to split screen between where the agenda item is and this discussion, and I'd like to follow along.
Yeah, and I thought,
Ms. Atkins.
Thank you, Commissioner. I thought we had a PowerPoint for this that walks through. Is that right?
You may, but I don't have one personally.
No, we had excuse me, Mayor and Commissioner, the PowerPoint was on the 16th. Now we just have the agenda item in the policy.
Okay.
So if Joe could call up the policy, then I think that would help everybody.
Great, thank you. You're right. I have my stack and file from our last few discussions about this.
Yep.
All right, so just let me know when you guys are ready for me to continue.
All right, thank you, Ms. Atkins.
No worries.
Joel, are you able to call up the agenda item?
There it is. Thank you, Joel.
Okay, I believe we're on that page right there. So Sarah, take over from here. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So in section 2, under definitions, we added a new definition for minority, which was a term that we added to the document. We did not use the term minority in the previous version of the document. And then we also provided additional clarity and specificity for additional definitions. So we modified cannabis, the community fund, equity, micro-local business enterprise, minority business enterprise, and women-owned business enterprise. In addition to those definition changes, we also modified our definition of equity applicant And these were small changes. The essence of the equity applicant is still the same. We clarified the cannabis conviction language for Charter 292. And then we removed the number of years residency formula that we had. In the June 16th presentation, you had to have a number of years from 1971 to a time frame and a number of years from another time frame to present, and it was very confusing. So we decided to move to just a flat 10 years between 1971 and 2016. In section 3 for policy review, we removed all efforts columns on the social equity points tables, and that was in an effort to remove the potential for subjective interpretation. If you will remember, the policy on June 16th had another column to the far right, and it had different definitions of effort, and we took those out. We also changed the social equity point allocation. Again, a minor change. We switched weight between two pieces. So local ownership weight was decreased from 4 points to 3 points. And then community fund investment weight was increased from 3 points to 4 points. And then lastly, in section 3 under policy overview, we clarified language in the table that outlines the city versus the nonprofit roles. And that concludes the changes that were made in section 3. For section 4, application and selection, for ease of reading, we removed several subheadings for fast track and deliberative track, and we replaced them with selection of applications so that it's not such a mouthful. And then we clarified the selection processes. For example, fast track content changes, we added dates and procedures for applications that qualify for director review versus applications that qualify for a special land use. And then under deliberative track changes, there was additional clarity provided. So the December 2020 dates were removed, and the new time frame for review, processing, application, queuing, and application review for Planning Commission will now take place between the dates November 2nd to November 30th. And then we added the date of January 2021 as the estimated beginning of application reviews for Planning Commission. So overall, staff consider these changes to be minor, consistent with the intent of the previous language, and desirable to support a strong cannabis social equity policy and to clarify the zoning procedures. Thank you, and are there any questions?
All right, thank you. Commissioners, questions? See if I can see everybody.
I think Commissioner O'Connor.
All right, Commissioner O'Connor. And then again, Joel, can you take this back down so that I can see everyone? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll start with Commissioner O'Connor and then Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, thank you. Just one question on the or the presentation of applicants. Just as you look to prioritize the if it goes faster than anticipated, or if there's not enough people who qualify, will timelines be expedited to backfill, or are we holding firm to those?
I'm sorry, the question completely broke up. I didn't follow.
For section 4, prioritization tiers based on the number of points. I mean, we hope that there's enough people that qualify based on the points, but will timelines be expedited? We move faster than anticipated.
Mr. DeLong, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I think that they could, but I want to confirm that, Commissioner, with Kristen Turkelson, who I believe is on this call as well. These deal with either administrative approval or Planning Commission approval. So perhaps Kristen can help with that answer.
Sure. So no, we had not anticipated expediting the dates based on the number of applications. The reason for that is because it would effectively remove the incentive for individuals to voluntarily participate in the social equity program if we didn't receive any applications or we didn't receive enough applications. So that the goal was to really incentivize. So if you participate and score more points, you will be reviewed and prioritized. Whereas if you choose not to participate or score lower, you would need to wait through that process.
Thank you, Kristen.
Right. Thank you. Commissioner Jones?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Atkins, for the presentation. I'm wondering, do we have any instances, or have we seen throughout the country where there's been shared space where you have perhaps a space that is perhaps owned and occupied by a non-minority, and there's space made available to an entrepreneur or a license holder of color to run their business out of that same space?
Yes, incubation periods are what we call them. We have a tiered level of what that could look like within our own social equity policy because we think that that's so important. Yes, we've seen it nationally. I think that because it's still a new industry, a lot of people are just getting underway. We don't have a lot of success data because people haven't been in operation super long, but there's a lot of policies that include provisions for that type of endeavor.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? I ask our city clerk to call the vote. Commissioner Hussey?
I just want to clarify the section 2, the changes went from 4 to 2. So is that essentially, am I reading it correctly, that those that have been most impacted via our criminal justice system would be able to get the highest number of points for? Is that correct? Okay, make sure I'm understanding that grid correctly. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Lanier?
I'm not sure if this is a question for this equity plan or if it kind of falls with the other work that's tied to marijuana. But I remember the last time we met, I was asking a question about could there be language that we're considering that prevents one owner from purchasing or getting or applying for multiple licenses, because what we experienced was that happening with the first round with medical marijuana, and it bumped others out of the process. A couple of those persons were local people and from communities of color. And so I don't know where to best place that, but just want to make sure that I mention that again to see if we've had those discussions further. And I think, Kristen, you responded to my email this morning about Ms. Frickelson about the research component. And so I understand your concern about adding a license that isn't currently recognized by the state of Michigan. So thank you for that response.
Yeah. And I'll attempt, and then Ms. Turkelson can definitely chime in. But the way this policy is set up for the equity applicants, they can't be out because of equity applicants. They receive the highest score and in priority. So they won't necessarily be bumped out no matter how many people apply. And to Ms. Turkelson's point earlier about the tiered and the time for social equity applicants, all of those applications in order to receive some type of priority will have to commit to being an application advancing equity. So we have a lot of provisions in place.
I don't think I have anything further to add other than I agree with what Ms. Atkins said. And also, I'm not sure if Kristen Rewa is on the phone or not, but perhaps we did have conversations about that very thing during the licensing ordinance discussion. And I apologize, I would defer to the attorney's office to better answer that, other than that it was more of a licensing ordinance issue rather than an equity or zoning amendment issue.
Amber, are you present?
I had to be added. Is the question about restricting licenses?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, a study cannot legally restrict how many, are you referring to state licenses or how many people can apply for city licenses? You're saying that you don't want one potential applicant to have 10 applications at once.
Yeah, I think what we experienced with medical was that one applicant had 7 approved licenses, and it locked in those locations, which obviously then impacts who else can have a license within a certain distance. And so the best way to try and address that, at least, from my opinion, would be to make sure that we're monitoring how many licenses we would approve for any one entity, so that we can make sure, and especially since one of those entities immediately put their license on the market or their business on the market for sale. So it wasn't any intent on opening the business as much as it was getting the license in order to make a profit off of the license and the business. So if restricting the number of licenses isn't the solution, I am curious to know what are some potential solutions to address that issue so that we can avoid that from happening again.
Right. So it goes back to what Ms. Atkins just mentioned, that the policy that the group has put forth has taken all of that into account, those concerns that you have. As far as restricting licenses, the way that the framework is set up, that's not, even if the city were authorized to do that, it wouldn't be necessary because of the measures that are built into the policy itself, which cause or incentivize people to take on certain equity initiatives so that they can get placed higher in the queue for consideration. It's also built into the new licensing ordinance. So from a special land use perspective, they would get considered for others who did not make those commitments. And those are binding commitments that can be enforced legally. That's written in there. And there's 2 types of applicants. So the equity applicants, which, as we just mentioned, get the most priority, and then the equity advancing applicants that have committed to engaging in certain processes to advance equity. And what's built in there is it's a very neat combination. It includes the licensing aspect of it. It includes policies. There's a nonprofit aspect to that, and it all works together so that not only do individuals who want to get into that industry directly have the opportunity to, but that for those who may not currently have the capital or the education or the business knowledge they need to receive resources that later on will allow them to do that. So it's a multi-front kind of attack that doesn't just focus on one aspect of increasing equity and does not just focus on minorities, for example, being the owner of a retail establishment or a provisioning center. It provides other skill sets that support the industry in addition to the ones that are direct. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm very appreciative of that. I am still curious, though, how would those who are local, who may not qualify as equity candidates, I forget the name that you were using, that you all are using in the plan, but if they're not equity applicants, how then, how would a local person fare if are there provisions in place to prevent them from being bumped in the event that someone receives multiple licenses? And I don't know what the sweet number is, but 7 seems excessive to me.
Well, as far as if you're saying that, can we write into the ordinance that each business is only allowed to apply for 5 licenses or 2 licenses, that specific language is not built into the ordinance. And we still have to take into consideration, free market principles and things like that, that we as a city not have direct influence over. So if you remember when we put together, it was a document that had these circles of influence, circle of control, and circle of control, influence. Somebody help me.
Circle of interest.
Interest. I wrote it. I wrote it and I can't remember. We've delineated, the areas that the city has direct control over and what it would like to see change and what we need a third party to do for us. That's been incorporated into all this planning that has taken place over months now by all these different departments. And it's all built in there. We think it's a very robust plan that even though it may not have that language in there that you're asking for directly, it's going to have the effect that you want. And also, as far as supporting the businesses and making sure that not someone doesn't have 20 licenses. As far as I understand, and Kristen, you can weigh in. Most of the land with our separation distances in Core City have already been taken. And Kristen, I don't know if that's completely true.
That is correct. There's very limited land that would be considered potentially suitable without waivers. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but with the zoning amendment before you this evening, no new retailers would be eligible for waivers at this point. So that I think that sort of speaks to the need for that deliberative conversation of if we desire to open up more land in the future, we may need to look at either separation distances between residential, for example, adjusting some of those to be able to open up more land in the future so that perhaps we can accomplish some of the additional goals. But that's not on for this evening.
If I could summarize, I think we've done the best we can given the legal framework of the state law to ensure that we have diverse ownership, multiple ownership, and that we have a really strong social equity plan. So what Amber said, I think, was really critical in terms of there are things that we can do directly, there are things that we can influence, and there are things that we can just be concerned about. And this is one that through our policy, we're working to influence. And we believe that the way we've allocated points promotes local ownership and gives those persons who are local owners a priority, so long as they also try to accomplish other parts of the social equity plan. So we understand exactly what you're talking about, Commissioner Lanier, and we've done our best to try to make it work within the context that we can work.
Thanks. All right, thank you. All right, Commissioners, any other questions or comments before I ask our City Clerk to call the question? All right, City Clerk, will you vote?
Sure. Commissioner Lanier.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Moody.
Yes.
Commissioner Sassi.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, Commissioners, next that will take us to a resolution approving the request from Cedar Springs Brewing Company for a new microbrewery, small wine, and small distiller license to be located at 42 Bridge. Do I have a motion?
Vote.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. City Clerk, do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, just really briefly, everything is in line with them for getting their approvals from all the departments. So they're all set to go for us to give our resolution.
Great, thanks. Commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, City Clerk, do you want to call the vote?
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Moody.
Yes.
Commissioner Sassi.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier.
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution to repeal Chapter 103 of Title 7 of the City Code entitled Amusements. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. City Clerk, you want to tell us about this?
Yeah. So we have this ordinance in there, it harkens back from the days also, when we used to license pinball machines and all those things too. But the state now does a full review of licensing for amusements, and also anytime there's an amusement as part of a special event. So basically anybody that was having amusements was getting double dipped for licensing. So, and we only do like 2 or 3 of these a year. But anyway, so if a special event's using amusements, then they're going to get checked by fire department as part of the special events.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments about that? All right, City Clerk, will you call the vote?
Commissioner O'Connor? Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi?
Yes.
Commissioner Repart?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Mayor Bliss?
Yes, it carries. All right, Commissioners, next, I think I'll give us a 5-minute break after this, but I'd like to call the question to go in executive session to discuss 2 legal opinions. So can I get a motion?
Move.
All right, moved. Thank you. Supported. City Clerk, can you call the vote?
Commissioner Moody?
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi?
Yes.
Commissioner Repart?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Yes.
Commissioner Bliss, or Mayor Bliss, sorry.
That's all right. Yes. All right, so we're going to go into executive session. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? I know some of us need to grab a snack or something. And so we're going to close out of this meeting, and then I'll see you all back in 5 minutes for executive session.
Just a programming note for those that are following along. Economic Development Project Team will be, depends on how long you're in closed session, but is that scheduled to start at 3:00. I'll leave this session open. So I'm going to go mute and turn off my camera, but this session will be open. So this, for those on Economic Project Team, come back into the meeting you came into this morning.
Great. Thanks, Joel.
So question, Joe.
Yes, sir.
We're going to go into Microsoft team meeting now.
Yes. So you just,
Okay.
just leave this meeting and then come back if you need to for the, are you on the Economic Development Team?
Yeah.
Yep. So then just come back in how you did this morning.
Well, I was wondering, can I come back in on my phone, or do I need to go to, so should I use my phone instead of using the computer?